When it comes to being a villainess, there isn't a shortage of any. However, in this anime, the main character wants to be the greatest. She's been reincarnated into a video game like all the others, but not fearing the evil villain, she instead always felt sick and disgusted towards the heroine's platitudes of goodwill with no logic. She had always admired the villain's talents and intelligence. Now being reborn as her, she's decided to push things to the next level, mastering both her magic and physical prowess to hopefully be able to combat the goody two-shoes. Along the way, she'll deal with various opponents and a prince who will obstruct her path. This is the story of I'll become a villainess who goes down in history. Will she succeed? Stay tuned to find out. Are kindness and compassion the most important things? This noblewoman answers, no, it's discipline, and that for commoners who fail to uphold such discipline, Alicia Williams would never accept. Alicia was the villainess in this girl's favorite otome game. She's an evil girl who torments the heroine, but this girl admired her fortitude and sympathized with her ruthless verbal abuse. She just couldn't bring herself to like the heroine after all. The Magic Academy is for nobles only, but they made an exception for her, even though she's a commoner. She's a goody two-shoes who's always spouting lip service. She uses her innocent, angelic smile to toy with the prince's emotions. This girl's friends all say they'd want to be the heroine, so everyone would love them. But personally, if she were reborn, she'd much rather be the villainess. And waking up, she now just remembered having those thoughts. Right now, she's the 7-year-old Alicia, the daughter of the high-ranking Williams family. Her kind brothers are the conquerable routes in the game. Up until yesterday, she didn't even question it. But this is definitely the world of that game. Her eyes sparkled, realizing she's reincarnated as the villainess. She couldn't pass up on this opportunity. She wanted to work hard to become the greatest villainess who goes down in history. And man, my channel will be history if you don't like this video and subscribe. Okay, maybe I'm being dramatic, but here at my Shoujo Weekly, I've got plenty of villainous stories to share with you. You'll find romance, you'll find drama, you'll find the most charming of princes. I also stream on a weekly basis, where we talk about anime and explore interesting games with you. So please, hit that subscribe, or I might die. No isekai. Alicia ran down the halls past her mother and her maid with a lot of vigor. They were certainly surprised to see her up so early. But Alicia was saying farewell to the undisciplined child she's been these last 7 years. She can't waste time if she wants to be a villainess who goes down in history. The first step was learning the art of the sword from her brothers. They were just as surprised to see her awake this morning, and even more that she was asking for sword training. She told them she wanted to get stronger, but they didn't believe her. The stern brother, Henry, claimed her request was merely a whim, just like everything else she asked for. The playful brother, Alan, scoffed that this was her usual behavior. However, the kind, sweet brother, Albert, promised to teach her on the condition that she build up the strength to wield a sword. She needed to do 100 sit-ups and 50 push-ups per day. If she did that for a week, he promised to teach her, although the brothers were doubtful she could handle it. She told them not to make light of her, running off looking forward to next week. Her plan was to study magic right now, and do strength training in the evening before bed. In this world, only nobles possess the mana that enables the use of magic. There are several attributes, with the most basic being dark, fire, light, wind, and water. The nobles who excel in these top 5 attributes are known as the 5 great noble families. They serve the king directly and function as the pillars of the kingdom. The Williams family, which excels in dark magic, is one of them. But even if she was blessed with natural talent, she knew she couldn't master any magic without training. She scrambled all around the library, disappointed to not find even a single book on magic. She decided to start with a book on plants, since she needed to broaden her knowledge with more than just magic anyways. She learned of herbs that brought down fevers, flowers that glow, and flying trees. But oh man, she was so engrossed in her readings that didn't exist in her previous world, she lost track of time. She was content, hardly believing she read all of these in one day. It seems Alicia's body had a natural talent in academics. However, as she barely stretched over 50 push-ups, shaking all the way, she would learn this same body was physically untalented. She'd continue to push though for the sake of her ambition. After resting, she'd find that the next day she could accomplish the push-ups and sit-ups with no problem. Her next plan was breakfast, then back to the library. She read at a breakneck pace, pushed her sit-ups to now 200, push-ups to now 300. So after 7 days of reading and training, she made a phenomenal amount of progress, and now able to do 500 sit-ups and 300 push-ups. Surely her big brother Albert should have no reason to complain. However, seeing Alicia's pleasant mood shocked all the men in her family. Her father, Arnold, asked what's come over her lately, especially since she's been waking up early. She smiled, assuring him nothing's come over her. She knew she was definitely giving off the vibe that she's plotting something, and so joyous over the fact she was like a real villain. Well, it's not like they'd believe her if she told them she recalled living a previous life. The mother then brought up how Albert was going to be out today. Turns out Paul would be taking the boys on a tour of the Magic Academy because 3 years from now, Albert would be 15 and enrolling, which also meant Alicia's sword training would have to wait until he came home. Finishing her reading, the bell rang for the time her brothers should have returned. Scurrying to find them, she noticed they were hanging out with all the conquerable routes in the game. There was the red-haired Eric of the Hudson family that specialized in fire magic, Finn of the Smith family, which held particular talent in light magic, Gale of the Evans family, which possessed mastery in wind magic, Curtis of the Kenwood family, who could use green magic. He wasn't from any of the 5 great noble families. And most important, the king's only son, Prince Duke Seeker. He uses water magic and ends up with the heroine in the game's good ending, and was also the one Alicia was most into. But she was going to leave the romance to the heroine. She needed an early start at making an impression as a villainess. When she ran up, Albert greeted her, then introduced her to his friends, who all thought she was so cute. Her heart was melting internally from their above-average looks. But this was a crucial moment. The world's greatest villainess can't be seen as a child with no manners, so she gracefully curtsied to introduce herself. The boys were impressed as she wasn't quite like the brothers had made her seem. They felt she was really well put together. Duke was not so captivated though, simply turning to the Williams brothers, who said they would show off their sword skills. That's when Alicia reminded them they promised to teach her starting today. She assured them she kept her strength training promise, and Albert said, all right, but you could tell none of them believed her. He took a sparring position with Alan, making Alicia pout. She quickly grabbed Albert's sword, kicked a tree to force a fruit to drop, and then easily sliced it in half, now telling her brothers to not make light of her. This actually got Duke's attention, and with Albert now accepting her seriousness, she was sparkling with gratefulness, and then ran off to go change. Duke then picked up the split apple to observe it, and smiled. A year after her brothers started teaching her how to use a sword, she's still just doing practice swings every day. The brothers told her training is useless if she couldn't hold a sword for several hours at a time. If she wasn't trying to become the world's greatest villainess, she'd be sick of this by now. And over the past year, Prince Duke has been visiting their house frequently. She wasn't sure why, but enjoyed seeing her eye candy around all the time. With her approaching, the prince asked if she was done for the day, learning she was just on a break. This was the first time he's spoken to her. He then asked why she worked so hard to learn swordsmanship, to which she almost answered to become a villainess, but stopped herself to say she wanted a villainously powerful grip. He laughed nervously, responding he'd look forward to it. Then patting her head, she became flustered. Albert then came by, making Duke pull away and apologize for interrupting Alicia's training. With her heading back, Albert questioned the prince on why he'd been coming so frequently. He thought it was for books at first, but now wonders if Duke had taken interest in his little sister, who was totally enamored with him. Elsewhere, King Luke was meeting with the rest of the leaders of the 5 great noble families. The village of Loana was apparently suffering from degraded living conditions year after year, but if they sent aid too hastily, the people would be displeased. They thought to turn their efforts away from it and instead focus on finding the Golden Rose, since their kingdom needed hope. Taking a break, all of the fathers discussed how their boys wanted to invite Alicia over to their houses, citing her polite demeanor. Arnold told them she used to be much more selfish. About a year ago, she suddenly started spending much of her time in the library. He couldn't wrap his head around why. Alicia found herself arriving from an invite to Finn's estate, heading out to the guest room with Finn for tea. Her brothers were alerted the king would be visiting here today. Inside the guest room sat the rest of the conquerable cast. She wondered what they were doing here. Moving inside, she noticed a map. At the end of the game, Alicia was exiled to a foreign country. Could it be that they were already approaching that ending? She felt things were moving faster than they were supposed to. Then, King Luke made his entrance and everyone gave their respectful bows. With Alicia displaying her usual curtsy, the king had her raise her head because he came to speak with her specifically. Much to her surprise, he quickly got to the point, asking how she felt about the position their kingdom of Dirkus was in. She was distraught, not understanding the point of his question. Why talk politics with an 8-year-old? But just as quick, she understood this must be a villainous test. She felt God has set this task to determine if she could be a great villainess. So, she expressed that while the kingdom of Dirkus is a major power, she could not call it a good nation. This shocked everyone in the room. She elaborated that while they may have a strong economy, the majority of the money lied with the nobility, creating a serious wealth gap. In Loana, a village on the outskirts, life is so difficult that many don't know if they can afford bread for tomorrow. Discontent toward the nobility grows ever greater. An uprising could break out at any time. The king then asked how Alicia would fix their economic strength. Her response was to take advantage of their neighbor, Calvera, and its gold mines. The king questioned this, since Calvera was ruled by Laval, another major power, making Alicia further detail they shouldn't go to war, but instead fund Calvera's independence. Their kingdom should maintain their relationship on the surface while trading with Calvera, and make them owe Dirkus a debt. Once Calvera gains independence, they would have advantage in trading with them. Using others in order to make a profit is something Alicia knew that Goody Two-Shoes heroine would never do. If she kept this up, she'd come into conflict with the heroine eventually. She felt totally on track to being the greatest villainess ever. The king praised Alicia's thought process and took off, leaving her to breathe a deep sigh of relief. Duke asked if she was nervous, and seeing him up close, she thought he really was quite attractive. In the halls, Lord Evans brought up that the golden rose had been found. Now things were getting serious. Being met with a table full of desserts, Alicia was eager to eat. She gratefully accepted, stacking her plate full of macarons. And munching along, Duke couldn't stop staring at her while smiling. Curtis remarked they used to call him the Ice Prince, but now it seems an unexpected spring breeze had smitten him. At sunset, Duke presented Alicia a gift. He knew it was a bit late, but this was a birthday present for her. Opening it, she was blown away seeing the diamond necklace. After Duke left, she was still sweating because diamonds were far more valuable here than back in her old world. She couldn't comprehend why he'd possibly give her this. Back in the king's meeting room, they watched the golden rose bloom. Its owner, a baker in the castle town. When the baker's only daughter was born, this unusual rose bloomed, so he kept it. The 5 great nobles now knew this girl was the saint. This girl would join the kingdom's ruler to guide the people to peace and save the world. When one who will control the kingdom's fate is born, a special rose blooms. This was proven when the blue rose bloomed for Duke. With the 2 of them leading the way, the kingdom was certain to flourish. However, the king knew such a transformation always came at a price, and the bigger the transformation meant troubled times certainly awaited them with destruction and war. The legend of the saint spoke of this to occur when the saint united with a member of the royal family. They all had no choice but to accept this fate. In Alicia's room, though, she was working on her squats while wearing her diamond necklace. Even if Duke falls for the heroine one day and demands its return, she would never give it back. She was going to look him dead in the eye and refuse, like a true villainess. In the library, Alicia was contemplating on how to get to the village of Loana. Looking at a map, she thought to go through the forest behind the mansion. The king said people there couldn't even afford bread. However, that was just all knowledge found in a book. She felt a true villainess should go and see for herself. The only problem is that there's no way she'd get permission from her father, which means she'd just have to sneak out. Wandering through the forest, she screamed at the slightest screeches from some crows. She had to remind herself that as a villainess, she couldn't let a simple forest at night frighten her. Loana used to be enclosed by a magical barrier meant to keep heinous criminals from getting out. But since she has magic, maybe she'd be able to pass through it. And inside, she saw the tattered village and it smelled horrid. There were homeless here as well, just sleeping on the ground. Alicia had no idea it was this bad. Hearing footsteps, she quickly turned off her lantern, knowing if the villagers found out she was a noble, they'd kill her. Upon getting her shoulder grabbed, she pulled out her blade, but now saw the man named Will, who did not have eyes. He told her there was no need to be afraid, and advised her not to draw her sword. Carelessly flaunting something like that here would only draw attention. He could tell she was not from here and inquired on her reason for entering, to which Alicia responded she needed to see the village with her own eyes. Leading her back to his place, he asked what she wanted to know. He gave his name and referred to Alicia as young noble lady, a big surprise for her since she hadn't even really conversated yet. Will explained that even though he was blind, there was still plenty he could ascertain. Sounds, for example. He could hear the slight difference in her footsteps between her left and right foot. Not being centrally balanced, he inferred she was carrying a sword. The rustling of her clothes told him she was a woman, and the scent about her is too clean to be found around here. The fact that she entered this village from the outside confirmed she was a noble who possessed magic. Back when he could see, he was surrounded by nobles all the time because he used to work at the castle. But one day, he spoke defiantly to someone far above his rank and earned their ire. He lost his sight and was banished to this village long ago. Alicia asked what he said to that noble, and we learned he said, "A tradition that's been upheld for a long time doesn't make it right today." It made perfect sense because why do we learn history? To make the present better. No matter how much we learn from books, it's meaningless if we don't use it for the future. Alicia gasped. She could hardly believe such a remarkable man was banished from the castle. She asked if he detested the nobility, and to some degree he did. But he knew the day would come when someone would understand what he did. With Will now wanting to know Alicia's story, she began telling him everything, even her dreams of becoming a villainess. He retained his calm expression while listening to her every word. Despite him telling her not to come back because it was dangerous here, she told him there was no point trying to stop her. Since she insisted, he recommended she only visit at night. She would continue to visit until a year passed. For the past 2 years, she's continued to read books, learn swordsmanship, and visit Grandpa Will periodically. The biggest change was when her brother turned 15. He entered the magical academy, where the game takes place. She was also certain Prince Duke must have met the heroine by now, and she couldn't wait for the day she would get to confront them as the Villainess. Wandering the halls, Eric asked her if she wanted to visit the town with him today. But hold on, her big brother Henry wasn't going to let the two of them go alone. Alicia was excited to see the town and spotted a particular shop that a friend of Eric's ran. Paul greeted them, welcoming everyone into his medicinal herb shop. His family specialized in green magic apparently. He himself was a happy-go-lucky, low-ranking noble. To Paul, plants were amazing. They had the power to cure illness and heal the soul. He was born into an environment that made it easy to learn about them. He wanted to use that to help people in some way, which is why he opened the store. He presented a Josiah, something Alicia was familiar with. 1 spoonful of Josiah infusion will bring down any fever instantly. Hearing how knowledgeable she was on the subject, Paul asked if she was into plants. So Alicia hit her villainous pose, saying, "That's just common knowledge. Anyone who doesn't know that just hasn't studied enough." Seeing everyone stare at her aura, she felt she had spoken like a true villainess. A villainess would never say something modest like, "I knew that because I've read lots of books." That's how a heroine would try to talk herself up. Paul just laughed, not taking it seriously. Perhaps she still needed to study up on how villainesses act. Paul complimented Alicia's cleverness and was now telling Eric he better not drag his feet because soon he'd have lots of love rivals. But man, Henry told Eric there's no way he'd let him have his sister. Returning back to where the rest of the conquerable cast was, Duke did not seem pleased Eric was spending alone time with Alicia. Curtis wanted his turn with her next, asking if there's anything she wanted to do. And there was. She wanted to take the swordsmanship test, making Eric nervous, while Albert expressed disagreement. However, Alicia wanted to see where her training has brought her, even though her father and brothers insisted it was out of the question. Albert was sweating, but told her she was still only 10 and a girl. She continued to challenge this, because all her brothers had taken it at her age, and there were no rules against females. Still though, he kept telling her no, and yelled at her that was enough. Realizing he lost his cool, he apologized, but reaching towards Alicia, she slapped his hand away. She didn't agree and wasn't backing down. She then left, storming out of the room. Albert was saddened. While walking the halls, Alicia was satisfied with her villainous reaction. The next day, she overheard Albert and her father talk about not telling her the reason why they won't let her take the test. So she quickly barged in, demanding they tell her and to stop treating her like a child. Arnold spoke in a sweet voice, reminding her she was a child, and he still wanted to be a father who worried for his beloved daughter. He promised to discuss the matter with her when she entered the Magic Academy at 15. That was enough to get her to accept and take off. Arnold knew he was just buying them time, but Alicia's swordsmanship already exceeded the capacity of a child. If he let her take the official test, she'd draw too much attention, good and bad. Albert reasoned that the 5 great noble families already knew the talents she possessed, given the economic plan she told the king a few years ago. He didn't believe they could keep her talents hidden much longer, but still, their father wanted her to live as a normal child. In her room, Alicia was throwing a fit. She knew she was just a 10-year-old child, but if she wanted to be the greatest villainess ever, she didn't feel she could waste any time. She decided to go visit Grandpa Will, with the hopes of them chatting clearing her mind. This would be the first time she visited him during the day, and entering the village, she instantly found 2 men fighting. The daylight exposed the true face of Luana. Sneaking around some more, she watched a man kick a little boy over, and this shook her to the core. Hearing the men laugh at the idea the boy might be dead, she was distraught. Then Will pulled her aside, asking her why she came at this hour. Alicia tried to go towards the boy, but Will stopped her, telling Alicia there's nothing she could do being a child herself. They took the boy, Jill, back to Will's place. Will didn't believe Jill had the strength to pull through. This was not a rare occurrence in Luana either, as there were no good medicines here. We learned Will gathered children together and taught them writing and arithmetic. Jill was just an orphan, and even though he was only 6 years old, he apparently possessed an astonishing intelligence. Perhaps if he received a proper education, he could have grown to be a remarkable man. But even children born in this village-turned-penal colony are branded as criminals for their entire lives. Will hated that fact, but there's nothing they could do to change it. Alicia felt the weight of this suffering village. She wanted for nothing all her life. She had the best learning environment and a kind family. Just being born in different places created such disparity between her and commoners. Even living in blessed circumstances, she now understood she was sheltered just like any other little girl. She felt disgraceful. It's not that she wanted to help people. That's not something a villainess does. But she was sure the heroine would have saved Jill, and being unable to do something the heroine could do was humiliating. She didn't want to make excuses about being too young or too powerless. The next day, she met with Paul and asked him to share the Josiah with her. He could tell someone was sick and injured and offered her a baggie immediately. She just needed to dissolve it in water and have the injured drink it. While Alicia tried to pay him, he stopped her saying it was on the house. In return, he just wanted her to continue to be a patron of the shop. After administering the concoction to Jill, he was going to be just fine. With Will thanking Alicia, she admitted to her powerlessness. She thought she was doing all she could to become the greatest villainess ever, but now understood if she couldn't take action when it counted, there was no point. So from now on, she was going to dedicate all she had to her studies, and work even harder to be a villainess who goes down in history. However, Will was still unsure about the term villainess. Back in the family library, Alicia was determined to find a grimoire. She needed to master magic. Suddenly, sparks flew off of her and revealed a hidden bookcase. Opening the first book, it was exactly what she was looking for. This whole section was magical grimoires. She got to studying. Learning magic had different levels. Levels 50 plus required the mana of the 5 great noble families. The highest recorded level was level 100, but in one part of the game, the heroine and Prince Duke exceed level 100. As a villainess, Alicia knew she might always fall short of the heroine, but that was no reason not to work hard. She wanted to start with level 1 magic to make an object float. She needed to focus her mana towards her fingertips. Thinking this whole thing to be strange since there was no incantation, she casted Float and marveled over the book she made levitate. Even though it moved and smacked her right in the face, she had more to learn and was fired up. A few days later, she was shuffling bookshelves using level 5 magic, movement of objects. She was excited over her mastery, but fell over since she hadn't slept much to train. Her body felt heavy, and she had a headache that wasn't going away. She thought maybe she was low on stamina. She thought maybe she needed to do more physical training. Then suddenly, she got called by her father, and turns out the king was coming to visit her. She was excited for her first villainous trial in 2 years. On the carriage ride there, Duke asked his father what this was all about, to which the king simply said he wanted to hear one of Alicia's stories again, since it had been so long. The king also knew Duke was accompanying him, thinking there was more to it. After exchanging greetings, Alicia was a little shaken on the inside, seeing the heads of the 5 great noble families were all in attendance. She wondered if maybe she was already so well known as a villainess. Getting right to the point, King Luke asked if Alicia loved this kingdom. She was at a loss as to what he was asking, so he rephrased it, now asking her opinion of the way the kingdom operates. Alicia thought about the right answer for a villainess to give. She remembered Jill lying injured and responded, "I despise the kingdom's systematic, preferential treatment of nobles," causing everyone besides the king to gasp. He wanted more clarity. She continued, saying she detested that merely claiming to be a noble places even the most incompetent individuals at the top. Joan Evans wondered if she was insulting them. However, the king did not care, wanting Alicia to go on. She smugly cleared up that she did not mean all nobles were incompetent, but knew that to be a noble, one only needed to possess mana. However, mana and political prowess were 2 very different things. A shame that no matter how talented a commoner was, they'd never be granted any opportunities. Just how much talent is going to waste in this magic-based class system. She told them this was so foolish, it gave her a headache. Joan was still getting pissed, telling her to watch her tongue. While Alicia wished he'd keep his voice down since she still had a headache, she was pleased with herself. The king then asked her one final question. Did she understand that what she said applied to her as well? Would she not mind being ousted from her place in the 5 great noble families? She confidently answered, of course she was aware, making the men gasp once again. She explained being born into her family was through good fortune alone, and that wanting to keep her status guaranteed at the expense of more talented individuals would be uncouth. The king was pleased, despite Alicia's unusual resolve. After the meeting, she was totally worn out and losing vision. She fell over, with Prince Duke there to catch her. He could feel she had a fever. Albert came by, offering to take her to her room, but no, Duke wanted to carry her himself. She woke up, still in a daze but with Duke near her bedside. He had her sit up, trying to give her medicine. She couldn't focus, only breathing, while Duke pleaded for her to take it. No use. He asked for forgiveness, as he gave her the medicine through a kiss? After resting for the night, Alicia finds her fever seems to be down. This must be all thanks to Prince Duke's medicine. Remembering the mouth-to-mouth administering, she tried to reassure herself that it was just a life-saving measure, nothing more. She believed the prince saw her as a little sister at most. She had someone more important to think about as the villainess anyhow, the heroine. So today, Alicia decided to infiltrate the Magic Academy to investigate. Reaching the campus, she proudly proclaimed she was lost, because this place was too big. She snuck around, looking for someone who could lead her to the school building, but if they knew a child like her found her way in here, she'd probably get thrown out. However, Alicia was surprised, seeing a green-eyed girl had found her. Liz Cather introduced herself. She had a surname Alicia had never heard before, and when Liz added that she was a commoner from a baker family, it became evident that she was the heroine. She didn't have a name or visuals in the game, so Alicia didn't recognize her. Out of courtesy, Alicia introduced herself, so Liz responded ecstatically and kind, asking where Alicia was trying to go. Liz then began leading Alicia to the school building. She thought of Liz as too friendly and ought to know her place. But then again, maybe not, since Liz was chosen to get into the academy on a scholarship based on her merits. She surely must have been treated unfairly due to her status. Alicia felt Liz to be ahead of her at the moment, but one day, she'd become her equal. Some other students then called out to greet Liz, and when she tried to introduce Alicia, our villainess had already fled in hiding to prevent being spotted. But now, she owed a debt to Liz for helping her find the school. Spotting Duke, Liz ran up to him, mentioning the cute little girl she met a few moments ago. The other students began to fawn over how good Liz and Duke looked together. Being a commoner and a prince, it was like a love that defies class. They had even heard when someone bullied Liz by hiding her textbooks. The prince found them for her. They were rooting for their romance. Alicia knew those two were destined to be together. Just like in the game, the bell rang to signal class was in session, so now Alicia could freely go inside. She got excited, finding so many wonderful books on magic. In another classroom, 3 girls began talking about this amazing little girl in the reference room. Strange though, since it wasn't visitation day. There's apparently a new task posted on the blackboard every week, and this little girl is writing answers to it at breakneck speeds. Even more astonishing because the prompts tend to be very challenging. This week's was, explain how Laval might be brought under this country's jurisdiction. Overhearing the little girl looked 10 years old and had black hair, Albert got pretty nervous on the idea it could be his sister. So, they went to check out the reference room where Alicia had answered, use the economic collapse of Duran to isolate Laval. Once Laval is impoverished, we pretend to help them, then stake our claim. Curtis became shocked seeing a 10-year-old girl come up with this. She was so proud of herself though, commenting the answer looked pretty villainous worthy to her, but then dropped her chalk seeing her brother and his friends right behind her. Albert scolded her till nightfall. Back in her home, she overheard her father and Joan Evans talking about a girl being a dangerous divergent. Realizing Alicia had overheard their conversation, Joan said there was no choice. He needed to erase her memories. But Alicia promised to remain quiet. She wouldn't tell anyone that Liz Cather was a divergent. In the game, the heroine's exceptional talents are regarded as dangerous. With nervous sweat, Joan was fine as long as she pretended to have never heard any of their conversation. Alicia accepted and vouched for Liz, not seeming like someone who would bring harm to the kingdom. She quickly took her leave, knowing now that the 5 great noble families had their eyes on Liz. She had to work harder so as to not fall behind. Later, Alicia tested her new level 10 dark spell that could clean dirty items. She was hoping to learn a spell that would purify Loana's drinking water, but that one's a level 25. She then got a knock at the door, and it was Albert telling her everyone's come to visit. Liz immediately greets Alicia with a familiar tone, something she found quite annoying. Albert wondered how Liz knew his sister, and she explained she helped Alicia find her way around the academy the other day, just like how he helped her on the day of the entrance ceremony. Suggesting this was all fate made Albert blush. However, Alicia didn't like Liz using her as flirting fodder. It definitely took no time at all for Liz to conquer Albert. Duke then prompted Alicia to have a seat next to him. The friends all gathered to decide what their class would do for the upcoming school fair, and since people outside the school would be attending, they'd love to hear Alicia's input as well. Alicia then remembered the school fair was the event in the game where Prince Duke and Liz rapidly grew closer together. As the villainess, she couldn't simply stand by and let that happen, but she contemplated slapping Liz with a challenge as her rival. She could go up to the two of them when they're getting all lovey-dovey and say, "A commoner like you has some nerve getting cozy with Prince Duke. Know your place." But now she had second thoughts, since using her class difference was unfair. After all, one's class was determined at birth. She felt if she wanted to insult the heroine, she should face her fair and square, maintaining her dignity as a villainess. Her new strategy was to clearly declare that she herself was the best match for Prince Duke. But now the idea embarrassed her, since that'd be the same as confessing her love to him. Liz saw how hard Alicia was thinking, and praised her for doing her best to help them think of ideas. Shoot. Alicia realized she was giving Liz a good impression. She brought up how she heard Liz could use all the magical elements, and suggested she give a performance on stage using her magic. Alicia now thought, how's that? A heroine would hate the idea of showing off her power like that, right? But she was now flabbergasted that Liz thought the idea was wonderful. Liz then suggested Alicia go on stage with her. However, Alicia indignantly replied she had absolutely no interest in performing with her. Albert told his sister she didn't have to go that far, and Liz started tearing up, wondering if she's done something to make Alicia dislike her, but quickly cheered up, telling Alicia there was nothing to worry about. If the two of them talked with each other a lot, they'd surely become good friends. Alicia was taken aback by Liz's optimism. Her brother then scolded her, saying, "You can't decide someone isn't a good match if you don't even know them." Alicia sighed, accepting what they said, so long as she didn't have to perform. At first, she thought talking to the heroine a bit might not be so bad,
But not realizing it would carry into the evening, she now knew that was a mistake. The heroine asked trivial questions, like what was Alicia's favorite flowers and sweets? It truly exhausted our villainess. She couldn't take any more, so she decided to use a spell to bring a flower vase right past Liz's face, offering Liz's favorite flower, the Marguerite daisy, from inside, and telling Liz it was the perfect flower for a goody two-shoes like her. Albert, Curtis, and Gail were in shock though. They had no idea she could use magic already. Alicia came into a nervous sweat when they suggested she must be a divergent. She misunderstood the conversation her father and Joan had. It was actually about her, not Liz. Albert then told her to go to her room and asked everyone else to leave for the day. Liz then reassured Alicia everything was going to be alright, because Albert would find a way to take care of this, and then thanked Alicia for the flowers. In the evening, Alicia relayed what happened to Will. He now understood the gravity of the situation, explaining to Alicia that most people could only use magic after turning 13. He once knew someone who could use magic at a very young age like her. They were praised by everyone for their talents, and increased their magic ability to level 80, but eventually came to ruin after overestimating their own abilities and trying to use level 100 magic. As a result, the person's mana raged out of control, and they were unable to ever use magic again. He warned Alicia to always learn magic in order by level. Then, they noticed Jill had finally woken up. Alicia was glad to see he was alright. However, Jill looked away. Due to his circumstances, he tended to shut others out. Alicia didn't blame the boy, but wondered what Liz would do in this situation. In flower language, the Marguerite daisy represented sincerity and trust. Perfect for a heroine, but the exact opposite for Alicia, since she wanted to be a villainess. Realizing Liz's words would open up Jill's heart, Alicia felt a tug of inadequacy. The greatest villainess in history should never lose here. Alicia, with a condescending tone, told Jill maybe he should just die right here and now. She went on, continuing to talk down on him from running away from what scared him, causing him to seethe at her words. He replied that no one asked for her help, and told her to stop running her mouth, like a noble had any idea how he felt. And Alicia responded he was right. She had no idea. They grew up in different worlds, but he was also right that she needed to take responsibility for giving him that medicine. So, if he didn't want to live, she'd be more than happy to kill him. She prepared her magic, causing him to toss a pillow at her, which fell sparkling clean. She was pleased to see him fight back. So long as he held on to his desire to desperately live, she'd do everything in her power to keep him alive. She'd support him. If he wanted to leave this place, she'd take him with her. He wondered why, but she told him not to get the wrong idea. She told him she wanted to use him. She heard he was clever, so she thought he might prove an excellent resource. After all, she was the villainess. Jill had no idea what she was blathering on about. However, Will whispered while she was a bit strange, she was good at heart. Jill got up, and now understanding she was nothing like the nobility he'd met before, and accepted his place as her excellent resource. He didn't want anyone thinking he was ungrateful. As the two shook hands, he smiled, thanking her for the medicine, and she remarked him to be quite cute with his smile, to which he denied. The next day, the 5 great nobles discussed Alicia being a divergent. The king brought up Liz's status as the saint, since no one has ever heard of a commoner who could use all magical elements. Alicia was also exceptional for having the ability to use magic at age 10, but she was born of noble blood. It wasn't hard to imagine this happening. King Luke commanded Arnold and Joan to keep an eye on Alicia to ensure she maintains control of her magic. Elsewhere, Alicia was shocked to learn Liz's magic had gone out of control while practicing for the school fair performance. She's fine though, since Duke and the others were able to bring her mana back under control. Alicia was relieved to hear the good news, since she still needed Liz to be her rival. Later, we see Alicia demonstrating her mastery of levitating and placing down several books neatly. Her father then gave the news that the king suggested they accelerate her entry into the Magic Academy. A special exception, she'll be permitted to enroll at age 13. She continued her training after that. And then, 3 years passed. Meeting with the king, Joan relayed that she had not lost control of her mana even once in the past 3 years. The men were shocked to hear that by this time, she reached level 80. more than the king expected, but he approved her enrollment into the academy. He then asked Alicia to serve as Liz Cather's watcher, something she wasn't expecting. The king brought up the legend of the saint, which Alicia knew as a girl appearing who was beloved by the gods. The saint was destined to work with the royal family, to bring prosperity to the nation of Dirkus. Of course, she knew all about this since it was in the game. With the king stating Liz to be the saint, he asked Alicia her thoughts on her, to which Alicia remarked Liz's head to be quite a lovely field of flowers. Truly a ruthless remark. They then presented Liz's essay on the village of Loana, and Alicia became nervous seeing the ramblings of the goody two-shoes. The king understood that if Liz was to be involved in their government as the saint, she needed to be capable of making realistic judgments. He wanted Alicia to guide Liz towards becoming a respectable saint. But wouldn't this make Alicia the best person there is? Not the villainess? The king then mentioned that while Liz is loved by many people, that love has gone beyond simple affection and begun to verge on widespread worship. There was essentially no one left at the academy who would speak out against her, basically plot armor. People who would confute her or criticize her in front of overzealous supporters often find themselves hated and ostracized. Alicia's father wanted her to refuse, so she didn't have to play the bad guy. However, she gladly accepted, stating her aim to be the greatest villainess of all time. Will and Jill couldn't believe the nobles were making Alicia the bad guy, but she explained she wasn't doing it for free. Jill was now permitted to leave this town to come with her as her personal servant. Her father was shocked to learn she'd been going to Loana for years now. She relayed her experience meeting Jill, a boy whose parents had already been killed and was on the verge of death himself. She didn't believe he had sin to bear, simply being the son of criminals. There were plenty of people in Loana whose talents were going to waste, if only they could just get a chance to get an education. The king believed there was no one better suited for the task than Alicia. Heading home in the evening, Alicia found an arm grab at her. It was a woman with wounds all over her body begging for help. Alicia needed to remain calm. Villainesses don't act on emotion, they act on logic. She carried the woman to the village fountain, but it was so dilapidated she couldn't use it to treat the woman. She knew she was attracting attention, and casually saving a feeble life or two on a whim? That's the villainous way. She purified the fountain and began to wipe down the woman. Jill and Will then appeared on the scene, but with everyone getting closer, Alicia placed a barrier to prevent any interference. Examining the woman, Alicia saw extensive burns and infections. One of the woman's legs was necrotic from the knee down as well. Jill explained this woman could not be saved, and that she was from a house that burned down. In this village, once you're badly hurt, you're doomed to die. Alicia reflected on her arrogance. She learned both magic and the sword so quickly that she was convinced she could do anything. But in this video game world, just being the rival of its protagonist didn't make her omnipotent. If she didn't figure out something soon, this woman would die. However, Will asked if the greatest villainess believed this woman could not be saved. Wasn't Alicia going to show everyone what the villainess who goes down in history is? Alicia remembered. The villainess she wanted to be was ambitious and hated lip service. Always remained calm and prudent. She's supposed to be a strong woman to her very core. A true villainess doesn't give up until the very end. She thought about all the dark magic that included healing, but the ones she knew only soothed cystic acne inflammation and rough skin. And that's when it came to her. She lit up her magic and enhanced its output, causing a shocking pain throughout the woman's body. An incredible force that caused the woman to scream as her wounds disappeared. Her treatment wasn't done though. Alicia needed to chop the necrotic leg in a single stroke. Eventually, the woman named Rebecca woke up to Alicia healing her, horrified to see her leg completely severed. However, Alicia explained if it remained attached, it would have put her life in danger. Alicia then praised Rebecca for surviving, and Rebecca knew that if she sought help from anyone else, she would have died. She tried to thank Alicia, only to get silenced. Alicia didn't want thanks, because she didn't help people out of the goodness of her heart. She wanted repayment, and thus, Rebecca became her personal informant. Letting down the barrier, Alicia announced Rebecca as a miracle woman, brought back from the brink of death. Rebecca had no idea what Alicia was saying, so Alicia clarified wanting her to gather the voices of the villagers as their provisional savior. This was also so Alicia could use the saint as a pretext so she could become the Villainess. At Will's place, Alicia elaborated, bringing up Liz's essay on the village. In order to make the fairy tale of the essay a reality, Alicia, as Liz's watcher, needed to get to know Loana better. She was going to be the mastermind pulling the strings behind the scenes. She wanted the residents of the village to actually be the ones who change it. Will was glad, as he had no intentions of leaving it, wanting to see this change to the very end. Figuratively, of course, because he was blind. At the barrier, Jill had to drink a potion that allowed him to leave the village. They said their goodbyes to Will for now, and outside, Jill was blown away by the beauty of the blue sky and green pastures. He wondered how things could be so different. Taking off for her first day of the academy, Alicia assured her father she had no regrets being the villain to Liz. She now wanted him to keep his promise and explained why she wasn't allowed to take the swordsmanship test all this time. To which he answered, "Because you're just too incredible." Deciding to take that as a compliment, Alicia knew her journey of villainess versus saint was about to begin. At the academy, the students around her spoke in hushed whispers about how she was the girl who got a special exception to enter, and how they heard her servant was an orphaned commoner. 3 girls then came up to Alicia, having heard all about her from Liz, and they knew she was Albert's little sister. One of them touched her hair, wondering if her brother's hairs were comparably silky, but Alicia slapped the hand away, calling them rude and unpleasant. Then, Liz appeared with her entourage, so excited to see Alicia. The girls explained being struck by Alicia, to which Alicia proclaimed they were being too friendly for only having just met. Liz came forward, telling Alicia that was no reason to hurt someone. Sparkling, she asked Alicia to be brave and apologize, knowing the girls would surely forgive her, only to receive a "no thank you" from Alicia in response, leaving the entire crowd in sadness and anger. However, Alicia thought this was the perfect introduction for a Villainess. Jill wondered how he was going to keep things together. And before Alicia could propose her next evil idea, she suddenly disappeared, getting teleported to a secluded spot in the library before Duke. He wanted to know why she didn't refuse his father's request, but she wanted to know why he knew top secret information. Well, it's because he's the prince, of course. The saint works with the royal family to bring prosperity to Durkis. Alicia thought Duke should have fallen in love with the heroine by now. She then responded to his question, saying by accepting the king's request, she could now say whatever she wanted to the saint. Since it was the king's orders, she couldn't be punished for doing evil deeds. Duke's eyes widened, reaching for the necklace he gave to Alicia all those years ago. Alicia wondered if he was going to tear it off. That'd be a scene befitting a Villainess. Oh, but he actually kissed it, whispering he was glad to see she was still wearing it. He thought she was adorable, because what kind of evil was a girl who turns red over his flirting going to do? She pushed him off sweating, calling this a breach of etiquette, and then ran off. She found this whole interaction to be a shock, wondering why the Duke would do this to someone he didn't love. I'm sure he loves you. Jill then finally caught up to Alicia, and of course, wondered why she seemed like such a mess. Switching gears, Alicia made her appearance at a tea party where all the potential male leads surrounded Liz. She brought Liz's essay and asked Liz if she truly believed all people were equal and that the hierarchy assigned to them by this nation was a problem, which was true, and why Liz wanted the wall around Loana removed, because it symbolized poverty. She believed once the people were freed, they could live happy, abundant lives, and the citizens of Durkis would be pleased to have more neighbors who could enjoy good fortune. If everyone was happy, there'd be no more inequality. However, Liz now found herself discouraged, with Alicia tossing her essay into the air, calling her idea far too shallow and unrealistic. Not to mention her essay was so boring she struggled to read it to the end. Her brother Albert was appalled, but to Alicia, this was the model Villainess move. Sweating in nervousness, Liz asked Alicia what was so unrealistic, and in kind, Alicia proclaimed it to be impossible for all people to be equal, calling the essay nothing more than a fairy tale. Liz tried to rebuttal, not wanting to give up the pursuit of the ideal, Alicia remembered this part of the game, where after Liz's dauntless rebuttal, the conquerable boys' affection for her arises, and that's when the villainess leaves. But Alicia wanted Liz to put up more of a fight. She elaborated on the naivety of believing destroying the wall would eliminate inequality that was based on birth, adding that if done without proper measures in place, public order would deteriorate. Liz wondered how Alicia could speak so badly of those villagers, while Gale wondered if Alicia was assuming the rescued villagers wouldn't be grateful, and instead run around causing trouble. Alicia countered, claiming it to be arrogant for a third party to claim they cleared away the resentment the villagers felt from being oppressed. Liz continued on about nothing good coming from clinging to resentment, and that forgiveness would bring an age of peace, but Alicia reasoned idealistic arguments were pointless. They needed to arrive at a calm recognition of reality, and then do all things that must be done, one at a time. That's what was missing in Liz's essay. Albert still didn't like the way Alicia was talking. However, Alicia wasn't backing down, questioning why no one here brought up the flaw in the essay sooner, faulting the fact that they'd all been too busy fawning over Liz. This enraged Eric, and he shouted Alicia shouldn't dare insult their bonds. Alicia just sighed in response, accepting the fact that their blind acceptance was how they showed their love for Liz. She called every single one of them useless. A cheerful disposition is what made everyone love Liz. Lovely looks, an incomparable amount of mana, and unprecedented proficiency in every magical element. Alicia pointed out Liz herself was the symbol of inequality. Wow, that's a really good point. Alicia didn't believe there was any need for all people to be equal, understanding the nuance of environment, family, looks, and talent. No matter how much the disparities shrank, no two people would ever be the same. But that's what made people competitive and ambitious enough to train and grow. Alicia believed the hierarchy that results from that to be a healthy thing. If people were no longer praised for their strengths in the name of equality, that would be unfair in itself. Alicia wanted Liz to clarify her ideals further, if in her essay wasn't what she meant by equality. She told Liz, as someone so powerful and blessed as herself, she didn't realize how influential her thoughtless lip service really was. Especially once the lip service wasn't enough anymore, the weaker areas were left to take up the burden. Gale tried to intervene, but Liz herself agreed with Alicia she didn't think her essay all the way through. However, she was in no way going to give up pursuing her ideals. She wanted to strive for a world where everyone could be happy. Alicia smirked, knowing this is exactly what she wanted. No one would trust a heroine who gave in to evil so easily. Alicia then took her leave, with Duke pleased as well. Liz understood that Alicia had said everything for her benefit. Alicia was especially happy about her results of the battle. The next time Liz spouted out goody two-shoes nonsense, Alicia was ready to cut her off, playing her part as the villainess in this story. In the halls, the students looked at Alicia with scorn, calling her the nasty girl who bullied Liz. She was proud of the hatred she garnered that shook up the once quiet, peaceful school. Jill questioned why everyone took Liz's side. All she did was spew grand ideals, while they sat around having tea chatting about nothing. But to Alicia, all this meant was that she needed to spread her bad reputation further, to guide Liz to the correct path. This was no challenge for her because her goal was to be the greatest villainess ever. After taking care of homework in the evening, the two went over to Will's house, where Alicia had Rebecca report on the stories she gathered from the villagers. As expected, negative emotions were predominant, and the most violent villagers even said if they were to ever escape, they'd plunder everything in sight. Alicia expressed concern for Rebecca. Because of her missing leg, she couldn't run away if anything happened. However, Rebecca responded she'd be fine, since everyone knew Alicia was backing her. Hearing this excited Alicia because that made her sound like a real villainess. Aside from the backing, Rebecca brought up how everyone in the village was born here, and most likely assumed changing it was impossible and gave up. But now that they've seen someone who would have died under normal circumstances was alive and trying to move them forward, it's brought hope to them. Although none of them believed Rebecca would be their savior. So their next stage of action was to request Alicia bring in some crops the villagers could grow here from the outside world. Later at home, while Alicia filled out a proposal for Loana Village, her big brother Henry kept pestering her.
She noticed he hadn't been spending as much time with his twin Alan, and we learn he's decided to put some distance between them. He and Alan had been together ever since they were born, so he was sure he knew him better than anyone else. But once they entered the academy, it was always Liz this, Liz that from the other twin. He felt like he didn't know Alan anymore. Then, Liz gently came up to Henry, telling him, "You're you," and that it was all right if he and Alan didn't think the same. Her words were like cool water coursing down his parched throat. He felt as if she saved him. What a simp. Alicia wondered if he was just here to ramble about how great Liz was to her. However, he answered just the opposite. He believed what Alicia said to Liz was right on the money, but everyone else thought Alicia was just picking a fight. Henry told Alan Liz's logic was naive, causing Alan to stand up and walk away. It made Henry feel like he didn't understand his brother, not just as a twin, but as a person. He himself hasn't felt like hanging out with Liz and following her ever since. And now that he's shown his hand, he wanted to know what Alicia was planning. He felt she must have a reason for clashing with Liz constantly. She denied anything, but he didn't buy it. He was done questioning for now, and taking his leave, he gave his sister an invitation to the king's next tea party where Liz would be. Making their way, her big brother Albert told her not to say anything unnecessary. She remembered this tea party being an event from the game known as the Saint Test. Choosing the correct dialogue options gave the player more Saint points. However, the Villainess didn't attend the event originally, so now this was the Villainess test. And Alicia's goal here was to display to the king her abilities as Liz's watcher. Liz was happy to see the four siblings. With two of her biggest simps blushing in front, Alicia stepped in telling her good day and, "How unfortunate for you that I'm here." This gave some of the boys tension immediately, although Finn was fascinated, unable to tell if the two girls were friends or enemies. Liz assured them they were great friends, while Alicia assured the opposite. And to this, Eric angrily told Finn not to talk to Alicia. The king then entered, thanking them all for being friends with his son Duke, telling them to just relax. But this was probably the least relaxing tea party in the kingdom. Seeing Liz smiling so unabashedly, despite the fact that she was seated closer to the king than the highest nobles and their sons, she certainly had a heroine's nerves of steel. Alicia remembered in order to unlock the game's true ending, the player needed to achieve a high score in the Saint test. But she herself could never identify with the goody two-shoes correct answers, so she struggled to beat it. Other than Alicia's attendance, everything was playing out just like in the game. Making her brothers hate her was a little sad, but she knew it was coming. The only one who's acting a little different was Henry. She observed Gale and Eric clearly hated her, while Finn and Curtis kept both her and Liz at a safe distance while acting friendly. And then there was Prince Duke, whose smiles towards her made her blush. She believed he was acting the weirdest. In the game, the only one he smiled at was the heroine. He was consistently cold towards Alicia, and that fueled the Villainess's hatred of Liz. The king then brought up how Alicia predicted the economic downfall of Duran when she had snuck into the academy 3 years ago. Turns out, things had proceeded in that country just as she foresaw. He was shocked at her analytical abilities. Liz was also shocked, thinking their economic measures had been working. However, Alicia explained the country's productive capacity and buying capacity were in disagreement. The economic measures from 4 years ago were merely stopgaps. She now called Liz's ability to be forward-thinking into question, saying this result would have been obvious to anyone else. Alicia could tell this was her test as a watcher. Since it was a completely different question than the one the king asked in the game, she was determined to win. Alicia remarked that with the collapse of Duran, their country of Durkis could not write it off as irrelevant. She asked Liz's opinion, and Liz believed they should form an alliance. Alicia challenged this, because what would they stand to gain from a bankrupt nation? And to this, Liz called it sad that Alicia could only see what they saw to gain or lose. She spewed ideals, saying that helping took sincerity, which the 4 simp boys happily nodded and smiled over, getting angry when Alicia brought them back to reality that sincerity wasn't enough to solve the economic crisis. Gale challenged Alicia first, saying, "All you're doing is negating her. What's your opinion then?" Alicia easily answered now that Duran was weakened, they should make it a vassal state. In response, Liz called it cruel, and her simps nodded again. Henry could clearly tell how ridiculous they were being. Alicia then reasoned what their kingdom needed to be careful of was the country of Laval, whom they currently had a complicated relationship with, taking over Duran instead. Derek actually agreed, mentioning his father told him there was rising anxiety near their border with Laval. Liz then became frantic about how the people of Duran felt, but again, Alicia spoke logically that it was foolish to care for Duran's people by putting their own nation in danger. She told Liz to use her head. What Duran needed wasn't temporary aid from another nation, but economic recovery within their own borders. Alicia brought up the example of making profit by exporting local specialties. Liz then became bright, mentioning Duran was famous for its potatoes, and while Liz eventually reached the correct answer, the king glanced over at Alicia, who had definitely done her job. The four simp boys had low perspicacity over what had happened though, only congratulating Liz for her great ideas, saying she'd done it once again. With Alicia safely passing her test, it was clear even Duke was proud of her. Wandering the halls on her own, Alicia thought of the party as tiring and wanted to go home. The moment the king left, the whole party was all about Liz. She observed the paintings of the royal family, wondering why one space was missing. Then saw a painting with a boy who resembled Prince Duke, with a man standing beside him who seemed familiar. Duke appeared, explaining that it was a painting of his father and grandfather from many years ago. Duke definitely took after his father, only inheriting his mother's skin tone. Alicia knew King Luke had an older brother, but didn't think this was the appropriate time to ask Duke why his father was on the throne. Hearing him offer to walk her out, she quickly hit her villainous pose, responding, "Are you sure you wouldn't rather stay with Liz?" She questioned if he was here to make sure she didn't do anything bad. However, he was matter of fact, saying she was clearly lost and he was gonna show her the exit. She was embarrassed, but he was right. Falling behind him, she thought once again how the prince only smiled at the heroine in the game. As he offered his hand to her, she didn't feel his smile was fake. As Jill watched Alicia do her morning training, Henry came up to talk to him. Jill was full of hesitation in responding, getting tricked into revealing he was from Lawana by the older brother. Henry observed Jill to be scared of everyone but Alicia. He told the young boy he'd end up being her weakness, and that he needed to hide his emotions or someone would take advantage of them, and that Alicia needed someone who would stop her from picking fights with Liz. Alicia came up, clearing up the misconception that she hated Liz, knowing she couldn't explain the Watcher thing. So she hid the truth in the guise of her dream to become a villainess, and that standing in the way of someone as perfect and as popular as Liz made her feel good. This made Henry break out in laughter. He thought it was so ridiculous. He was still laughing in their carriage ride, but he felt if his sister wanted to stand in Liz's way, it made sense. He thought of Liz as a protagonist in a fictional story, and that anything she said sounded special. The most obvious statements from her sounded like words of salvation. He always thought nice girls weren't his type, yet he was totally into her. Jill questioned if this was caused by some kind of magic. Alicia contemplated this. Even knowing Liz was the saint, the way everything turned in her favor looked unnatural from the outside. Henry didn't think there was any mental manipulation from Liz. He brought up a type of magic where one's mind could be manipulated temporarily, but that magic didn't work long term. Alicia still questioned the theory though, wondering if there might be an answer to this somewhere in an ancient grimoire. She couldn't believe Liz was actually so wicked that she'd manipulate people. Her superficial, innocent behavior was straight from the game. It was only natural that people loved such a nice girl. Alicia herself was further from her game version than anyone else. In the game, she was exposed for her lack of talent, and was eventually driven off, so she chose to become more powerful. Henry and Alan were constantly together in the game too, and Duke was only supposed to be nice to the heroine. The village of Lawana only appeared in name as well. This world was different from the game in so many ways. Seeing Jill getting caught by some strange men, he told Alicia to run, but before she could react, a man struck her from behind. She woke up, tattered and tied up, kidnapped and in a storage shed. The men from earlier then dragged Jill in. Now she was pissed. She threatens the men, telling them to let Jill go unless they want to die. However, she realizes she can't use magic with the collar on her neck suppressing it. The men laugh, and one of them grabs her and smacks her aside, telling her to watch her mouth. And with Jill helpless, telling her to run, another man steps on him. With their attention on the boy, Alicia finds her opportunity to kick away the man in front of her, and now she was ready to fight back. The man in front of her gets back up, so she trips him back down, dodging a sword slash and undoing her arm binds. She knew this may be the world of an otome, but right now, everything in it was real. She couldn't afford to die. With the men beginning their assault, Alicia dismantled them, taking care not to kill a single one, using only non-lethal blows. Jill was surprised that even in a situation like this, Alicia held on to reason and didn't kill mindlessly. She began her duel with the last man, dodging his strikes and even slashing his sword apart. The man knew he couldn't combat her and began running, but Alicia stopped his tracks by tripping him with a stick she threw. She then stood in front of him, flipping her blade backwards for another non-lethal strike, only to get stopped by Liz Cather's magic? Liz scolded Alicia, asking how she could do something so awful, to which Jill answered, shouting the men were the bad guys. However, Liz screamed back that she saw Alicia attack the man. The man then used this opportunity to draw another one of his blades, attempting to kill Alicia. But then Prince Duke suddenly arrived, blocking the blade with his wrist and taking out the assailant with a fierce kick. Alicia was horrified seeing his injury, while he apologized for being late. She tried to explain the situation, thankfully seeing Henry was here to tend to Jill's injuries. Falling to her knees, covered in injuries of her own, Duke seemed greatly hurt. The rest of the male leads then arrived, with Albert trying to console his little sister. But for some reason, they all turned on her, hearing Liz explain that she tried to kill a man who wasn't resisting. Jill once again reasoned those men were trying to kill him and Alicia first. But then Albert uses Liz-level reasoning, saying if Alicia tried to sincerely talk to the men, she wouldn't have had to resort to violence? Even so, Alicia asked him if he would draw his sword against someone trying to harm his family. He gruntled and answered that he wouldn't. Alicia became disappointed her older brother would toss his pride as a knight. Liz then came in, spewing ideals about violence only breathing further hatred. Alicia countered with the fact that she was about to die, and all Liz did was look at her quizzically, saying, "But you're not dead, are you?" The reasonable cast members were stunned here. Liz then lit up, saying if Alicia just had faith and waited for her, she would have saved them, because Liz had faith in the bonds with her friends. Man, there's something sick and cynical in Liz's goodwill. But when she went on further, saying Duke came because she had faith, the prince began erupting the area in an icy tundra, shouting that he didn't do this for Liz, and that she shouldn't be so full of herself. When Liz tried to respond with her own magic, he questioned how anyone like Liz could possibly be the saint, given she would have allowed Alicia and Jill to die. He really almost attacks, but luckily, Curtis intervenes, de-escalating the situation and healing Alicia's wounds. Alicia tries to thank him, but feels something weird in her cheek. A tooth was knocked out, probably when the assailants hit her. Duke was not happy about this. Liz offered to take care of Alicia, but Duke shouted there was no need, as he's already arranged for her treatment. Liz tried telling Duke he was misunderstanding her. She claimed she would never think it didn't matter if Alicia and Jill died, and Alicia actually agreed with her statement, knowing Liz would never tolerate someone's death. However, Alicia added she'd definitely draw her blade again if placed in the same situation. Liz tried to dissuade Alicia's thought process, but Eric told Liz there was no need, and that Alicia just didn't understand what was really important yet. Alan added that Alicia would understand someday. Duke was sick of this pointless conversation, deciding to pick up and carry Alicia out while she flailed. Watching them leave, Liz wondered if Duke had feelings for Alicia, but Gale suggested he just saw Alicia as a little sister. Liz expressed relief, but her tone became strange, saying she was glad Duke was concerned for Alicia. Making their way, Alicia was still fussing about Duke being overprotective, since she could walk on her own. To that, he continued to give her a serious look, telling her she was free to act as she pleased, but he didn't want her to endanger her life. He squeezed her tighter, admitting he felt like he was gonna die seeing her in pain. This made Alicia really question if Duke actually liked her or not. She knew the prince ended up with a heroine, but why were things playing out like this? Her heart was beating so intensely, she didn't know why she felt so relieved at this moment. Opening her eyes the next day, she found Duke sleeping in bed with her shirtless? She tried to calm down, but all she could see was his body. She couldn't stay calm at all. The devil on her shoulder told her to seduce the prince and get ahead of the heroine. The angel on her shoulder told her she shouldn't, and that misconstruing the prince's consideration was something a villainess with integrity would never do. Alicia wanted to be a villainess, but not an immoral woman. The two opposing sides of her mind were fighting about what to do. Alicia was going to begin her leave, getting stopped by Duke, who presented her pendant that one of the kidnappers had stolen. He beckoned her to come forward so he could put it back on her. Placing it back on, he lifted her face, pulling forward for a kiss. But when Jill came in, Duke got shoved off the bed by reflex. Henry didn't mind if they had that kind of relationship, but Jill also wondered why the prince didn't have a shirt on. The group recollected in a lounge room, with Henry expressing he was glad he entered before something happened. Jill then presented Alicia's tooth. He wanted to keep it because he once heard that teeth carry memories. He didn't want to forget what happened today. He was so frustrated from his inability to help Alicia, he desired to get stronger in order to protect her. The older boys then debriefed who was behind the kidnapping. It was Neil Johnson, another one of Liz's simps, who gave Alicia particularly angry looks during the school garden tea party. Alicia was ready to enact payback. However, the last time Henry saw Neil, he was half dead at Duke's hand. The royal family has already punished the Johnson family. It was forbidden to take the magic seal and collar from where it was stored. And on top of that, Neil put another student's life in danger. Alicia felt a little embarrassed since there was nothing left for her to do. Duke suspected his own father had a part in this incident. Alicia agreed, saying this was a perfect training opportunity for the saint. Duke explained when he had tracked down Neil and forced him to talk, an observer arranged by the king had told Liz where Alicia was. The king must have wanted Liz to resolve the matter to grow as the saint. Jill protested in anger, but Alicia brought up the importance of the saint, since the saint was supposed to save the kingdom. She herself was proud to fulfill her role to stand in Liz's way. When Duke apologized on behalf of his father, Jill questioned this, since as prince, he was supposed to marry Liz. Alicia knew. She knew even if Duke really did have feelings for her, he had to follow his destiny. But to her surprise, Duke answered he had no intention of playing along with destiny, telling Alicia that a happy ending is something one sought for themselves. Jill got up, apologizing for being suspicious of the prince initially. Duke then got up to pat his head, saying he wanted to protect the both of them. Alicia didn't know what kind of face to make in a heartwarming scene like this. In any case, she felt the need to get strong to not get caught off guard again. The story now had too many deviations, but she accepted the unknown route as her new reality. She tested her magic, sighing because she couldn't make any progress beyond level 80. Jill then suggested that instead of her being a villainess, that Alicia focus on making a name for herself as the prince's wife. She became flustered, responding, "No," because she wanted to go down in history as the greatest villainess, not just someone's wife. She felt that was the only way to go, which made Jill start to feel sorry for the prince. One of the maids then called for Alicia, and in her father's office, he wanted her to no longer act as Liz's watcher and leave school until she was of age. He didn't want to put his beloved daughter in danger any further. Alicia refused, still wanting to fulfill her duty. The father then countered that Liz was above level 80 in all elements, and that even though Alicia was the second most powerful in the school, she couldn't compete with that. Alicia continued to argue, so he would accept her continuation if she reached level 90. Alicia became nervous, knowing she was in a rut, but she accepted, determined to win, and isolated herself in an annex to begin her training. It's been a month since Alicia secluded herself in the annex to study. One of the maids came by daily to bring food, but the edge of the magic barrier was the closest she could come, having to douse the food in magic so it could pass through. Alicia refused to let anyone interrupt her training. The maid remarked it was a little sad, thinking Alicia might be struggling. However, Jill uttered that getting sentimental about the situation would do no good. The young boy was well liked by the staff, and even though he was allowed to eat the same as his master did, he was a boy of few wants. He was surprised to see the other servants eating in a manner he saw as luxury, since he himself grew up very poor. The other servants became so sympathetic they gave some of their shares to him. Jill viewed himself as the most fortunate villager to have ever come from Loana, and he desired to live up to the expectations Alicia set up for him. That's why he studied hard in the library. Lord Williams arrives to give Jill a magic potion that he can use to return to Loana anytime he wants. He was grateful to Jill for assisting his daughter, since Alicia isolated herself studying all the time instead of hanging out with other girls growing up. Jill was the only person Alicia had forged a friendship with, all on her own, and the father hoped Jill would continue to remain good friends with Alicia for a long time. Jill was surprised to hear the Lord talk like a regular dad, since he thought the action of locking Alicia in a shed was pretty cruel of him. Apparently his wife thought the same thing, calling his decision to have her level to 90 child abuse. He was depressed because in truth, he never intended for Alicia to take it this far. He set the level 90 condition because he wanted her to give up on being the Saint's Watcher. But for some reason, it just made her even more motivated. Jill believed in Alicia's ability though. He knew she was the type to always do what she said she would, and he told the father to have a little more faith in her. Still, Lord Williams didn't want his daughter involved with Liz Cather because it put Alicia in danger. He noticed how his oldest son, Albert, had changed after meeting Liz, and he himself was not sure about wanting Albert to succeed him anymore. After the incident where Alicia was attacked, the king visited him personally and gave him permission to relieve Alicia of her watcher duty, but he knew deep down the king still wanted her to continue. Jill was skeptical of both Liz and the tale of the saint, questioning if people really believed she was going to save the kingdom. The Lord called the concept of saving the kingdom quite ambiguous, but he believed she was worth using. Liz had extraordinary magical talents, and once she graduates, she'd be put to work for the kingdom for sure, but the same would be for his own daughter. Anyone who possessed exceptional talent would be put to use by the kingdom. If Alicia was a helpless little girl, he could have protected her as her father, but as the head of one of the 5 great noble families, he knew his place was to be just one of the people who ends up using her. He knew he couldn't always take her side because of that. Jill held no contempt towards the father, but knew Alicia wasn't just some pitiful girl who would accept being used. If anything, Alicia thought everyone else around her was weak. She had said the magical supremacy in this kingdom was inefficient, because the nobles talked about using a little girl for the benefit of the kingdom, while people who lacked magic weren't even considered. Jill knew Alicia intended to train him up, so he could be someone she could use. So no matter what, he'd always be on her side. Back in Loana Village, Rebecca, Will, and some kids are having a great time growing crops that Alicia helped them with previously. A thief suddenly tries to steal from them, but luckily, Nate appears to stop the thief. He was skeptical of Alicia though, saying her goodwill was just a way for her to feel better about herself. Rebecca disagreed, responding that a self-serving whim would have been Alicia just giving them food instead of helping them grow their own crops. She was optimistic in the path Alicia was setting for the village to move forward. In the king's office, Duke was looking away hearing his father scold him for helping out with Loana Village. The king claimed, however, that he was not trying to reproach Duke. It's just that his aid was written in Alicia's proposal. Liz's essay had inspired unprecedented levels of sympathy for Loana, but the issues with the village could not be resolved with sentimental arguments. Alicia compiled various concerns and proposed plans in a way that builds upon Liz's ideas. The king offered his son the task of officially reforming Loana, knowing the village had been used to lock up only innocent people while isolating them using magic on a large scale. Liz called it a humanitarian issue, while Alicia pointed out it was a waste of land and mana resources. The king knew it was an issue they'd have to tackle at some point, but the need had never been pressing. Thus, generations of kings had chosen not to deal with it, himself included. He acknowledged his son was more brilliant than himself as well. Duke could tell his father had too much on his plate, as is, and decided to take on the task. We move to 6 months since Alicia secluded herself in the annex. We see a spark of her dark magic, and Henry comes by to comment on it. Jill remembered a time watching Alicia train and how she explained no matter what, she'd never catch up to Liz Cather. Hard work was never truly rewarded, but it didn't matter to her since she wanted to get as close to Liz in power as possible. Henry was surprised his little sister would go so far to compete with Liz. Liz was an actual prodigy who could cast multiple instances of spells that were difficult to cast singularly, but still, he believed his sister could eventually stand up to her. One day at school, Duke became depressed hearing Alicia was still not returning yet. The students began whispering about how Duke must be miserable, claiming he hated Alicia so much he was worried she might come to the academy. But hearing this, Henry glared at them. Duke hated the other students for not understanding Alicia, but still running their mouths. If they had kept going, he would have personally had them expelled by the end of the day. Curtis then came, teasing Duke to not be so scary, since their school lives should be healthy and cheerful. Henry brought up how weird things were, because no matter how hard he tried to clear up the bad rumors about his sister, nobody believed him, and instead, they'd just say he's being a nice guy who cared about her. Curtis then brought up the rumors that Alicia paid a visit to Duke at night, and Duke was saddened, because had he known the results of the rumors that would have come with him spending the night to take care of her, he would have come up with an unshakable fait accompli. Liz then came by, noticing Duke's somber face. She tells him that some delicious tea and pastries could help. Duke just becomes annoyed, hearing the 4 simp boys behind her praising Liz's cakes that could make him feel all better. The girls behind then spoke of how lovely Duke and Liz looked together, and how with Liz around, he was able to forget how troublesome Alicia was. This pissed him off more. Liz wanted to give him her cake she poured her heart into making, but he just told her he wasn't in the mood and left. With that, Eric chimes in telling her not to worry. Then, Albert suggests Duke might be on edge because of his stupid sister. But to Liz, this was no worry. She believed she could bring Duke's smile back, making the simp boys glimmer in joy. Hearing more girls talk crap about Alicia, Duke glares at them. But Finn moves the prince along, playfully saying how interesting things have become. He was interested in the girls' behaviors, knowing they used to hate Liz's guts. They even bullied her all the time, but at some point, they all started being all, "I love Miss Liz." Duke made no comment on this, instead continuing his leave. Curtis thanked Finn for helping him de-escalate things. He was struggling to keep the student council together, while Finn was having fun watching things play out. By the water fountain, Duke tells a mysterious pink-haired girl named Mel to look into Liz, thinking there may be some mechanism behind why everyone loved her. 2 years pass, and we see Henry has given Jill some sweets to help with brain function. Alicia had always preferred macarons as her confectionery of choice. At this time, there was less than a year left before Liz Cather graduates, and he assumed Alicia would have fulfilled her father's condition much faster than this. The father tried to approach her on her 15th birthday to talk about going back to the academy, but she just turned him away, having told him she was just getting to the good part. Then, a maid comes by, telling them Alicia had just completed her training. Jill ran to the annex, finding the barrier was gone, and inside, he found Alicia, who was surprised to see how tall he'd gotten. It had been so long, Jill had no idea what to say, but it was clear he was stunned by Alicia's beauty. She also was at a loss for words, until she suddenly bursts out that they should head back to Loana Village. Jill wondered why Alicia was so eager to head there before even seeing her own family. In response, she mentions she learned exactly what she needed to in those 2 years. Inside, she was astonished to see how far the village had come with all the villagers working together. Nate, the village guard, comes by to greet them, thanking Alicia for being the reason the village has prospered so much. Because of her, he didn't have to see any kids starve to death this year. But still, he did not trust Alicia. Alicia's attitude remained unchanged. She was pleased he was so wary. Nate's gratitude quickly becomes hostile. He brings up that she'd been gone for 2 years and now suddenly came back. He questions her motives, suggesting she was here to toy with Rebecca and everyone else in some kind of noble's game. Jill tried to reason with Nate, having explained the situation over many times. However, Alicia interjected, telling Nate to draw his sword so they could have a test of skill. Since the two didn't know each other, she thought it'd be best if they could both discover each other's capabilities. Nate had reservations, not wanting to sink low and beat up a weak-looking girl like Alicia. So, she taunted him, saying if he wasn't confident in his skills, they could compete in some other way. He didn't take that well. And now we see a crowd surrounding the two, with the sounds of swords slashing. Rebecca steps forward to see Alicia had easily bested Nate. The villagers couldn't believe anyone could beat their strongest guard. One of them claimed Alicia cheated using magic. To this though, Nate told them to shut up, acknowledging her talent as the real deal, and put down any idea of her fighting unfairly. Alicia was matter of fact, saying to him, "Let me tell you why I won. It's because I'm the daughter of a noblewoman." She explains she could spend all day doing nothing but training because everything she needed in life was provided for her. She even had older brothers to learn from who were skilled swordsmen. She believes if he had learned in the same circumstances she was in, the outcome of this match may have been different. Nate asked why that mattered, questioning if she was being snide on purpose. She's telling him to use her to learn. He obviously had things he wanted to protect, like Rebecca, ooh. Will then stepped forward, calling Alicia as reckless as ever, and she runs right up to him for a big hug. The two were incredibly familial, as Alicia tells her endearing grandpa she's acquired dark magic up to level 91. With dark light embracing the two, she speaks with the Dirkus ancient tongue, casting a spell Will begged her not to, one that transferred one of her eyes to him. He was stunned, distraught, questioning if she knew what she had done. She knew exactly though, also knowing he would never ask someone to give him an eye, but she wanted him to be able to see. Getting out of his shock, he's happy to finally see what Jill looks like. He was happy to see all the villagers for the first time. On the way back, Alicia details her missing eye socket feeling strange, but not hurting whatsoever. Back at home though, her father fell over seeing the loss of her eye. He hysterically asked if something went awry during her training, but now hearing she gave her eye of her own free will to someone else, her father's soul left his body. In his office, Alicia explains she knows she's not the little rich girl her father wanted her to be, but she was going to continue to live the life she felt was right for her. Even so, he refused to compromise his worry for her. He was her father after all. He congratulated her on surpassing level 90, and as a man of his word, he gave her permission to continue acting as Liz Cather's watcher. Later, Jill hands Alicia an eye patch he made personally for her. With its pretty design, she felt she needed an appropriate outfit to match. Coming back to the academy after 2 years, she knew there'd be an audience to the return of the Villainess. She went to school in all black, giving a good day to the ladies. She was incredibly conspicuous by design, stating a Villainess needed good visual presentation. She's then approached by one of Liz's ardent followers, Jane, who told Alicia it was best she never came back to the academy. The girl mocked Alicia's outfit, describing it as garish, and saying Alicia could never be as amazing as Liz. She glazed Liz for never prioritizing outer appearances and for always looking at everyone on the inside equally and fairly. Alicia agreed. What's inside was more important than what's outside. However, the reality is that most people judge others based on their looks. Biggest own? She brings up that Jane just criticized her for her appearance. Jane was nervous, trying to say Alicia's filthy inner self was showing on the outside, but she wasn't ready for Alicia's comeback. Alicia told the follower her hair was unkempt and full of split ends. The way she wore her skirt made her legs look fat. Her ribbon was crooked, as if Jane's slovenly inner self was showing on the outside. Oh! Jane tried her best to cope, using excuses like she didn't try to keep up her appearances and that Liz said she was perfect the way she was. Alicia thought this was strange, asking why Jane wore her hair to unnaturally cover her eyes. Why did Liz never say that her freckles were lovely? Hissing Jane off. Liz then came by, asking what was wrong, and Liz was surprised to see Alicia. Jane tried to play woe is me by telling Liz Alicia insulted her appearance. So, Liz reassured the follower she was a lovely girl. Liz wanted to catch up with Alicia since it had been 2 years, but first wanted to hear her side of her interaction with Jane. Alicia just laughed, responding that all the insults she said to Jane were true, and claiming herself to be an unscrupulous woman. Liz didn't care even if Alicia was truly wicked. She wanted to look into the eyes of all those involved before passing any judgment, especially after the event 2 years ago, where she had restrained Alicia because of her own preconceived notion. She believed Alicia stopped coming to school because of that event, and wished she had made more of an effort to meet Alicia where she was. But to this, Alicia, of course, did not stop coming to school because she felt hurt. She didn't want the heroine's sympathy, but was now surprised to hear Liz did not feel sympathy, but instead, regret. Liz began spouting that she believed Alicia would have been fine no matter what, and that she was going to save her. After all, Liz had been a lucky girl since the day she was born. Everything she believed would happen always came to be, and everyone became happy because of it. She was so certain she had a duty to make people happy. She hoped to be someone who could save everyone someday. This made everyone cheer. However, Jill thought the heroine's words were so stupid. Alicia tells Liz straight that maybe things have happened to work out for her thus far, but there was no certainty that things would always work that way. She then whispered to Liz, Besides, you hate me, don't you? Alicia figured this back when 2 years ago, she was the only one Liz restrained. Given Liz's talents, she should have been capable of restraining both her and the assailant at once. Liz was now shaking with Alicia explaining there was malice in her previous choice of action. She tried to deny it, because the saint would never harbor such feelings. Alicia now concluded Liz could not even perceive her own hatred of her. If Liz wanted to be a good girl, Alicia wanted her to take being good seriously, because all she did was spew lip service while never taking any specific action, and managed to have a happy ending in the game in a true opportunistic style. That fact always irritated Alicia. She pointed out how Liz wanted to save everyone, yet still had no plan. She wanted Liz to take initiative and see things through. Jane questioned what Alicia had done to leave Liz shaking, and Alicia responded by saying she didn't want Liz's saving. Her ideal was to stay true to herself, even if she died, hated by everyone. A week later, Alicia and Jill take their entrance exams, and both of them receive scores that could easily place them in the most advanced classes. The counselor at first praises the Williams house for giving Jill the best of tutors. However, Alicia explains he studied all on his own. This makes the counselor become sympathetic, downplaying the limits of those with commoner heritage lacking magic. Walking the halls afterwards, Alicia explains to Jill that unfortunately, there are limits to what commoners can do in their current society. Their kingdom was an aristocracy, and since commoners can't use magic, they're often turned away on sight from any educational or career opportunities. She found this so annoying, since most jobs in the kingdom didn't require magic either. Then suddenly, a torrent of water appears in front of them, and with an angry Prince Duke as well. He's pissed seeing Alicia's eye patch, and she nervously brushes him off, telling him that's no way to greet someone after 2 years. He heard about her giving her eye away, but she told him that wasn't his concern. To this, he tells her she didn't understand how he felt watching her all these years. She could now tell he wasn't just angry, but also sad. He tells her he knows she's been playing out the villainous role for fun since she was little, but hearing her say, "You're bothering me," he stuttered back a little. She told him she never asked him to watch over her, while on the inside, she knew that wasn't what she wanted to say at all. He apologized, looking somewhat broken, and told her he was going to cool off. Now she felt like she messed up. Jill knew Alicia was a little over-emotional. She tried to play it off by saying her response was very villainous-like, but Jill called her out for being lame. Alicia took this and reflected. Having disputes with her rivals and insulting them was fine, but not trampling over the heart of someone who was genuinely worried about her. She felt like scum. When Duke looked at her, she always felt like her head went blank. She never wanted to put that distraught expression on his face. She wondered why nothing ever went right with him. And outside the window, having seen everything, was Mel, calling Alicia a clumsy villainess. As the bell for the class rang, Alicia was still shook from her interaction with Duke, but she chose to attend class anyway, continuing to play her villainous role, despite her brother and all the other classmates detesting her. She's transferred to their class as of today, saying the classes in the lower grades were so easy, she was bored out of her mind. All lies, by the way. Alicia actually studied her butt off. With Gail calling her vulgar due to her condescending tone, Liz pleads with the students to stop insulting and alienating her. But even with the heroine extending her hand, Alicia turned it away, only fixating on Prince Duke in the front. After class ends, while concurrently denying Liz's invitation to lunch, again, Alicia only stares at Duke's empty seat. In response to Alicia being unfriendly, Liz fought back on wanting to get closer. She reflected on what Alicia had said to her the other day and realized it was rude of her to assume everyone would automatically like her. She wanted to start over and take time to really get to know Alicia. The friendly, forgiving personality Liz had was Alicia's least favorite archetype. People like her were always loved, and the best match for the prince. Alicia snaps out of her moment of insecurity to tell Liz she isn't in the mood for lunch before walking away. Alicia knew it was crazy to compare herself to the heroine, because she was the villainess. She admitted in front of Jill that maybe Prince Duke was actually special to her, but wondered why she could never be a proper villainess in front of him. So, he suggests maybe she stay away from Duke for a while. That way she could really understand what he means to her. However, she refused, since that would make it look like she was running away. A very unvillainous thing of her to do. She gets up, resolving to fix this and to stop having a pity party. At lunch, after finishing her meal, Liz sees Duke sitting by himself and sighs. Alicia then enters and walks right up to him. She comments on how unbothered he seems, and teases she came to see him hurt and sulking. To both his and Jill's surprise, she admits that even though she never asked for his help, she appreciated it regardless. She was genuinely happy knowing he worried for her, and actually gave an apology for her harsh attitude from before. No one could believe what was happening, but then, she asked if he was going to watch over her. Why did he not just come out and tell her? When he looks down, averting his gaze because she's right, she lifts his face up, explaining that expecting someone to understand motives unspoken is presumptuous. She made it loud and clear she'd never just watch over someone from afar. She'd protect them out in the open with her own 2 hands. Alicia was the villainess, so she needed to respond to the prince the way a villainess should. He finally broke out in laughter, telling her he wouldn't hold back anymore. Watching them, Liz scrunched and started emitting a strange aura that affected the expressions of those around her. She got up and told Duke they couldn't make suggestions about the music festival without his input, so she wanted to talk to him about it. Apparently, during his sulking, he'd been skipping his council meetings, so he got up to leave, happily. This happiness seemed to make Liz somewhat sad, but she brushed it off before following Duke. Alicia felt ecstatic knowing Liz definitely saw her as a rival now. She couldn't get too eager though, given Liz only saw her as a romantic rival. To reach her dreams of becoming the greatest villainess, Alicia needed to become someone who could genuinely compare to the heroine in abilities as well. A student named Marika suddenly walks up to Alicia, asking for her help and for them to go somewhere else. Alicia refused, despite Marika's begging, because Marika wouldn't elaborate on what she needed help with. With Alicia heading to class, Marika drops her books, so in response, Alicia uses her magic to help put them back in her hands. Then, after Alicia gives her a good day and begins leaving, Marika's attitude switches to becoming cynical, having recorded the interaction for malicious intent. But she had no idea Mel was watching. At the male lead's usual tea spot, Albert gets up, giving Alicia a stern look as she arrives on the scene. She explains she received an anonymous letter to come to the Rose Garden after school, written by Jane. Jane was here to expose Alicia for bullying her dear friend Marika. Alicia now knew their interaction from before was a setup. Jane accused Alicia of repeatedly and despicably harassing Liz, then taking up additional pent-up resentment on Marika. Marika then played her magic device that had a voice recording of Alicia taken out of context to make it sound as if she had been relentlessly bullying Marika. Jill tried to defend his master's innocence, but Alicia stopped him. She knew the voice recording happened through earth magic, and that this particular spell was very high level. She started to giggle and was happy, now thinking Jane would make a decent villainess. Liz asked why Alicia would harass Marika. The students then began shouting at Alicia, telling her to apologize. Alicia was going to respond, but before she could, Carol intervened, saying this wasn't right. She reasoned Alicia mentioned she had no recollection of bullying Marika, and they were just trying to make her out to be the bad guy. With Jane countering, Carol cowered in a bit of fear. Jane called for proof, and that's when Mel decided to step in. She played the recording of what actually happened, and now everyone was at a loss to what really occurred. Gail asked Jane what was the meaning of this, and now all eyes were on her and Marika. Mel rhetorically questioned why the two recordings sounded so similar, of course, leading them to the fact that Marika's was a lie. Marika admitted that Jane coerced her into this scheme immediately, and now everyone was admonishing Jane. She tried to turn this around, bringing up once again that Alicia was mean to Liz, using that as justification for her to punish Alicia. Seeing this, Liz stood in front of Jane, choosing to apologize on her behalf, since Jane did it for her sake. Alicia did not accept the apology, but decided not to refute it either. Now that the event was over, Mel was so happy to be face to face with Ali. She had been wanting to talk to her for so long. In the school halls, Alicia confronts this mysterious girl, bringing up the fact there's no way she'd record the event if she didn't know this was going to happen ahead of time. She also was certain Mel wasn't even there. But instead of answering, Mel jumped at our Villainess, saying she was Alicia's biggest fan. Mel loved Alicia's silky black hair, pale, glassy skin, the sharp words that poured out of her lips, and her strong-willed golden eyes. Her tone then suddenly shifts to be aloof, as she openly says she absolutely hates Liz Cather. She hated how Liz shoved her nose right into everyone's business. Most people would be annoyed by this, yet everyone ends up becoming yet another one of her followers. However, there's no sign she's using any spells or magic tools to mess with people's minds. Mel found Liz to be utterly creepy. There are some students who weren't her followers, but most are keeping quiet because they just want to get by in peace. The tone then switches back to be more comical, as Mel grabs onto Alicia's arm. Singing Alicia's praises, she suddenly gets pulled back by Prince Duke. He apologizes on behalf of Mel, explaining to them all that she's his personal spy and subordinate. Alicia thought that was so cool, because a spy was such a villain thing to have. Duke pulled Mel, who was trying to jump at Alicia once more, explaining the spy to be eccentric, but also a genius when it came to earth magic. Earth magic had the power to record sound and also allowed the user to conceal their presence. When Duke admits he ordered Mel to keep an eye on Alicia, he adds that he didn't tell her sooner because he didn't want Alicia to feel like her freedom was restricted. He opened up about how he liked Alicia how she was naturally, vibrant and lively. But hearing what she told him earlier made him rethink things. That's why he's now decided to come clean about Mel. And she was just as happy to be able to talk to Alicia. With him admitting he wanted to protect Alicia with his own two hands as well, Jill could see the two flirting and told them not to go off into their own little world here. Alicia gets embarrassed, but liked the idea of having a co-conspirator. Then Jill says it made Alicia happy because it was the guy she likes. Ooh. This was too much for Alicia, so she made up an excuse to leave. Outside, she assures Jill that wasn't an excuse, telling him they were going to go visit Grandpa Will. She thought how she acted earlier wasn't very Villainess-like, aspiring to be a woman who could make Prince Duke's heart race. Making it to Loana, we learn Nate is leading the village's vigilante corps, spearheaded by Will, who has a lot of energy since being able to see again. Making his entrance, he tells everyone it's time he talks about Loana's future and his own past, as we learn he's the older brother of the current king, his full name being Will Seeker. Thinking back to the portrait, she now knew the man standing beside Luke was his older brother. Everyone sat by the fire as Will gave his backstory of being the firstborn son to the previous king. His mother died shortly after giving birth to him. Instead of spending time with his family, he devoted himself to the study of magic, where by the age of 10, he reached level 80. His tutor and many others deemed him to be a prodigy. However, Will was humble, believing those who led the country possessed even greater power. One day, though, he foolishly fired a level 100 spell, destroying the castle within a frozen tundra. His life was spared, but his capacity to use magic was not. 1 year after that, Luke was born. Normally, it was not acceptable for a low-ranking noblewoman not even married to the king to give birth within the castle. However, an exception was made in order to produce an heir, since Will could no longer use magic. Will supported his younger brother as their nation's new king through and through. Things worked very well between the two, with Luke ruling and Will handling policy, until one day, Luke rejected Will's policy to split ruling power between the 5 great noble families. Luke's mother convinced him of the negative effects of such a division of power, and even though Will desired to rework the policy, Luke shouted at his older brother, not wanting to be told what was right or wrong from him anymore, since he wasn't even king. That was the last time the two brothers saw each other, because Will received an exile order with an accusation for plotting to kill the king. Next thing he knew, he woke up battered and eyes gouged out. Some villagers in Loana explained that with him being dumped here, he must have done something pretty bad. Touching his eyes, he screamed at the realization of his situation. He accepted his own conceit led him to where he was today. Jill didn't believe Will deserved to be framed. However, there was no record of him being banished. The official story is that he went missing. Only Luke's mother, who planned it all, and a handful of others knew the truth. Alicia then surmised the reason Will was telling them all this was because he was ready to speak to the current king. Since there were no records of him committing a crime, no one could argue with Will if he asserts his charges to be false. Will believed forcing innocent people to live here all their lives just because they happened to be born here was wrong. He wanted to tell his younger brother to set the village free, but the first thing he wanted to do was apologize to Luke. He failed to respect his younger brother's pride as king. Will originally thought by writing all the policies, he was giving his all for the kingdom, but admitted to that being conceit as well. He thanked Alicia for giving him the opportunity to make things right, making her bashful. Walking on campus, Alicia and Jill discuss the great things Will is looking to do. 3 female students suddenly approach her, bringing up how they hate Liz for being a commoner and getting into the student council by being a temptress. Alicia of course disagreed with them, citing Liz's exceptional talents. While Alicia disagreed with Liz's ideology, she willingly acknowledged her abilities. She then brings up the fact that Jill is a commoner, and more intelligent than all 3 of them, causing the girls to leave. She believed her villainous points just went up, and Jill couldn't help but sigh. Later in the classroom, Jane apologizes to Liz for the scheme the other day. Instead of accepting, Liz apologizes herself, saying it was her fault Jane acted the way she did. Liz told the boys to stop ostracizing Jane, and they smiled and agreed to return to their normal tea time. However, Albert walked by Jane, uttering to her in secret to never associate with Liz again. She was so hurt. She shouted at Carol, who had just been watching. Then suddenly, the 3 girls who met with Alicia earlier had something to say to Liz. In the halls, Henry meets up with Alicia to tell her there's trouble afoot, and she gets excited. Mel overhears them and quickly takes off to retrieve Duke, despite Henry not wanting to involve their prince, since he always lost his cool when things involved Alicia. Finn and Curtis spotted the trio making their way, and decided to go observe since an event more entertaining than playing catch was about to go down. Alicia proudly made her entrance, whereupon Liz tells her the 3 girls had told her Alicia had been saying mean things about her. Since there was no proof, Liz desired to hear it from Alicia directly, but Alicia thought this farce to be ridiculous. If they were going to accuse her, she wished they had used an interesting tactic like earth magic to record her. She found nothing fun about simple lies. Liz accepted Alicia's words as truth, and when the 3 girls insisted Alicia had used the most foul language to insult her, Finn immediately accused the 3 of being the ones who said nasty stuff. In fact, he had seen the whole interaction with his own 2 eyes. He made it clear they were trying to set Alicia up. Mel was a bit disappointed that Alicia didn't get a chance to show off, since the 3 had lost on their own. However, as the villainess, Alicia felt she needed to do something to move things along. She insulted the 3 students, calling them less than trash. Liz did not like this. Even though they had done something wrong, she felt calling them trash was too much. Alicia responded by taunting Liz, causing the heroine to shake. Eric began to shout at Alicia, saying she couldn't comprehend Liz's kindness and strength. He defended Liz, adding that protecting nobles even though they disliked her was exactly what Liz did. He then rambled about a time when a wild wolf showed up at the academy, and Liz protected all of them while trembling out of fear. Alicia challenged this though, questioning how an animal that doesn't even live in this kingdom showed up at the academy. She sighed, deciding to leave because she lost interest. And Duke told Eric he went too far before taking off as well. Liz began to sulk, thinking she and Alicia really couldn't be friends, causing the aura to emit from her once more. This aura made the female student trio suddenly utter they had complete faith in Liz, something that both Curtis and Finn took notice of. Having tea in the garden area, Jill explained the story of the wolf was true. Strange because wolves only resided in Laval. Durkis and Laval currently had no diplomatic relations, so Alicia suspected they could have sent a wolf to probe the saint and see if Liz's powers were true to the legend. She thought sending a wolf was a pretty evil thing to do, and that maybe she should use it as a reference for how to be a better villainess. This caused Duke to freeze his drink. He suddenly took her to his personal hideout within the academy to tell her to leave his Uncle Will to him. He had apparently been visiting Luana before even she did, having kept personal contact with Will occasionally. When she decided to ask him about Will's friends who were banished to Laval long ago, Duke slammed his hand against the bookcase, telling her she didn't need to know, or even waste her time thinking about Laval. He wanted her to only think about him. He grabbed her waist, whispering that he wanted to lock her up, but was quickly met with her headbutting him, refusing to be his bird in a cage. This only made him more obsessed with her. Outside though, she was blushing because that was way too much. During the lecture period, the professor asks which of the students knows about the particular illness that's become a problem in recent years, known as Dotten sickness. With Jill raising his hand, the students begin to chatter their distaste for the servant boy trying to show off, adding their criticisms of Alicia hiring a commoner for a servant into the mix. However, Jill answered skillfully to perfection, describing the sickness having symptoms of spots all over the body and that the afflicted would eventually waste away. The spots were misleading, as it was not a skin condition, but rather a visceral disease, mainly seen in those who live in the Dagon River Basin, and it's believed the disease was caused by the river's water. Later, in a more secluded study, Alicia applauded Jill's backbone in answering. Duke and Mel came barging in, complimenting our villainess on being both cute and diligent, causing her to get flustered, questioning if they were trying to ruin her villainous image. Then, as Liz's group passes by, she sees Duke calling Alicia adorable, a sight that truly makes the bright heroine fill with disdain. Alicia details the poor water quality of the Dagon River was attributed to the rapid development of Laval. Since the country of Dirkus was downstream, they couldn't do much about it, because any countermeasures would make their relationship with Laval difficult. Supposedly, there was a wonder drug in Laval, a rare herb called Maddie, that cured the disease. Alicia had read of it, knowing the herb only grew on steep, rocky precipices of northern Laval. Jill then expressed a saddened look on his face, explaining the region of Dirkus with the highest infection rate of Dotten sickness was in fact Lawana Village. The village had no doctors and hygiene was quite poor. Most people who contracted the disease died quickly. In the privacy of Duke's quarters, Mel asks him if he's going to stop Alicia, since they both know she'd most likely try to go to Laval to get the miracle herb. He himself wanted to stay by her side, but felt like if he did cage her like a bird, she'd no longer be the Alicia he knew. It was when she flew freely, that was the Alicia Williams he loved. Mel gushed over his declarations. While Jill was retrieving a book Alicia had left on the library desk, he was met by Liz. She called for him to have a study session with her, as she wanted to learn more about Lawana from him. He at first told her he didn't believe it'd be easy for an outsider and villagers to understand each other, but when she spoke her beliefs in that they could with enough effort, light emanated from her, putting him into a trance-like state. She walked towards him, explaining her relation to the fact that she was also commoner born and bullied by the students here initially. She wanted to study with him, so that way they could come up with an essay even Duke and Alicia could agree with. And to this, Jill became positive of Liz, now strangely expressing his belief in her. Then suddenly, Duke calls out to Jill and asks Liz what she had done to him. Jill takes a defensive stance in front of Liz. However, Duke breaks him out of the trance. Liz tries to tell Duke she wasn't finished talking to the boy, but he angrily tells her there's no need to continue. The two return to Alicia, where Jill explained he didn't quite understand what had happened to him. Duke warned Alicia to be careful of Liz, then touched her face with affection before disappearing. Alicia was a flustered mess, but Jill wondered what his warning was about. Meeting with Mel, the prince learns she made no progress on whether or not the saint's influence was some kind of malicious ability, but she took off, going to continue her research. With Liz only thinking about Duke's nasty expression towards her, she continued to release more of her dark aura. This aura seemed to twist Jane in the cafeteria. She then pulled out some scissors, making Carol scared. In the secluded study, Alicia only had more questions. Laval, Dotten sickness, and the wolf that appeared from that country. All things she couldn't learn about without going to the country herself. She wanted to know more about the world outside of the Otome's game script. However, the only way to get there was to be exiled by the kingdom. The devil on her shoulder suggested committing some really nasty crime. The angel thought maybe a more peaceful way might be asking the king to let her go. However, hearing screams coming from the cafeteria, there was no time for comedic banter. Carol was panting from Jane cutting her hair, and Jane blamed Alicia for all this. Alicia confronted Jane, but Jane insisted it was Alicia's fault Carol looked so pathetic now. Jane believed Carol had been looking at Alicia with foolhardy abandon while she continued to challenge Liz. Jane berated Carol for looking up to Alicia, and hated how the both of them had made a fool of her. Alicia just sighed, declaring Jane's resentment both hysterical and irrational. But man, Jane was vicious, saying Carol must have grown out her hair just to be like Alicia, and now gave off an evil cackle since Carol's hair was nothing like Alicia's now. Jane then called Alicia a terrible woman for showing no sympathy towards a crying girl who looked up to her. But to this, Alicia affirmed her lack of sympathy. If she aspired to be the same type of woman, then she believed Carol shouldn't be bothered by a little spat like this. Being hated is what made a villainess a villainess. Alicia then signaled Carol a look, while Jane continued to spout to the other students Alicia's lack of care for Carol. Carol did not blame Alicia though, of course, pointing fault to the psycho wielding the pair of scissors. Seeing Alicia within Carol, Jane started shaking, then wielded the scissors threateningly, which was stopped by a single shot of dark magic by Alicia. Our villainess then next did what no one expected. She cut her own hair as well in front of everyone, wanting to match Carol. The people were positive of Alicia's actions, except for the other bully girls. Meeting with Duke, he thought her haircut was so cute, it was infuriating. Infuriating because he wanted to be the first one to see her new cut. Mel then jumped right on Alicia, expressing her adoration this way, making Duke even more furious. Mel was grateful Alicia helped out Carol since the two were relatives. Curtis and Finn observed more girls wearing short hair these days. Alicia had been receiving much more praise lately from the student body. They then overheard some female students fighting over who could use the garden area between those who supported Liz and those who supported Alicia. Curtis went up to them, telling the Liz followers that all this tension was ruining their lovely faces, pulling them away since they couldn't help but want to chat with him. Walking the halls, Jill observed that even the most devoted followers of Liz seemed to have started changing their minds. Alicia thought maybe she must have started to develop her evil charisma, a joke that Jill didn't find too funny. However, she did think the behavior shift of the students to be somewhat strange. She then saw Marika splashing Jane with mud, blaming Jane for being the reason she was now pegged with the reputation of being a liar. They continued to bully Jane, claiming her to be the reason why the other students started to doubt Liz. But as Marika was going to go for another toss, her mud exploded, splashing her and the other bullies. Alicia called them a disgrace, telling them if they didn't leave, she'd send them flying. So, they dipped out, and man, was she proud of her villainous dialogue. Jane then started questioning why Alicia was helping her, and told them to get out. But in response, Alicia just used her magic to clean her, telling Jane it was okay to cry. Jane retorted, telling Alicia she wasn't going to cry and she didn't want sympathy, and Alicia left her, letting her know that frustration was how people grow. It was okay to cry, so Jane did, in the privacy of the classroom where Alicia wouldn't let anyone else enter. At the Royal Palace Library, Mel finally hit the jackpot on info about the saint written in ancient text. While Alicia points at a map towards Laval in the morning, Mel suddenly jumps onto her, and she's ready to announce the secrets she's discovered about the saint. There's a type of magic called charm that only the saint can use. A magic type that Alicia had never heard of. But Duke and Mel discovered its mention in an old book written in the ancient language. According to the book, charm magic is a special power that only the saint can possess. That's why in legends about the saint, they always say she brings happiness to everyone's lives just by being present. Duke believes Liz has been using the magic unconsciously, and adds that people can resist a spell if they have strong mana and willpower. Exactly why Jill could not resist because he does not possess mana. Denoting the strange behavior between the three girls who tried to antagonize Liz, and Jane who acted completely erratic at times, Alicia suggested Liz's emotions might be out of control. Her charm was most likely affecting everyone evenly up until now, but something must have thrown it off balance. Henry then hypothesized that maybe to break free, one just needed to start having doubts in Liz. That's what freed him. Although, he tried explaining Liz's flawed reasoning to his brothers and friends the other day, but they wouldn't listen at all. Duke then suggested they tie everyone to chairs and hold them prisoner until the spell wears off. His serious tone turns flirtatious when he tells Alicia he wouldn't mind being held prisoner if she was the one doing it to him. This totally caught her off guard. From this interaction though, both Jill and Henry had an idea of what was making Liz unstable.
Alicia quickly pulls away to recollect herself and tells everyone they should explain Liz's powers to her. During lunch, the simp boys tell Liz that Duke and Henry had told them not to trust her. This makes her upset to the point of her charm magic unleashing, and now Albert is accusing Alicia for being at fault, and the rest of the boys said they'd handle her. Alicia's party arrives, and watches Liz get taken away. Then, Albert and Gail approach her. They demand Alicia stop spreading baseless lies about Liz. They were convinced she was spreading these lies to isolate their beloved heroine. Alicia pleaded with her brother to let her talk with Liz, however, he denied her. Then, he and Gail walked away. Later at the garden area, Liz couldn't take her eyes off of Prince Duke making his entrance. With him asking to join her, her charm lit brightly, shifting the other boys' glares into warm friendship, with Albert offering him a seat. Liz was a little perplexed, asking where Alicia and Henry were. However, Duke just told her he didn't want to hear her say another man's name right now. She was flushed. And so were the other guys? All the while, Alicia's party was watching from a safe distance. She had seen those smooth lines from Duke in the game so many times. Right now, she's pretty sure he was saying, "You always try to treat everyone equally. So is it a crime if I want to have you all to myself?" She almost wished she could see it in person. Duke led Liz to his private study to talk. Then, Henry appeared asking the rest of the boys if they wanted to hear their conversation. Liz was at first excited to see the room, but then not so much seeing Alicia was there as well. Duke apologized for misleading her, but explained it was the only way to get her to have a proper talk with Alicia. Liz complies, and that's when Alicia tells her to stop using her charm spell that she doesn't realize she's using. Reading the description of the spell in the book, Liz denies herself ever using that spell. The more Alicia reasoned logic about the things that happened to Liz she considered lucky, the more Liz denied. Liz was insistent she became friends with everyone because she got to know them better. But Duke reasoned even more seriously, saying that the way Albert thought about Liz was not equal in the way she thought about him. He posed the idea that she never really questioned the ardent devotion so many people had for her. Liz became frantic, asking if that was true, why did Duke not like her? He did not answer. In response, she told him she loved him, and seeing his stern look, she asked him why he looked at her that way. She explained she didn't obtain the powers of the saint because she wanted to. She was scared the day she had suddenly been enrolled in a school for nobles. Meeting him for the first time, she tried all this time to be the saint everyone wanted. She wanted to be worthy of this power, and worthy of being with Duke. Seeing her cry, Alicia now knew Liz had just been playing the part of the ideal saint the entire time. All the strange things she said and did were purely in pursuit of that ideal. Who she was inside never matched. Liz made a strong declaration that she cared more about Duke than Alicia did, and asked if she had met him before Alicia, would he have loved her instead. However, he confidently responded he would still have loved Alicia. This hurt Liz, enough to make her flower wilt. Alicia wondered how Duke could make such a major proclamation like it was nothing. Suddenly, Liz told Alicia she hated her. She hated Alicia's confidence and initiative, but above all, she hated that Duke loved her. She wished Alicia would just disappear. Then, all the guys who'd been watching suddenly appeared, unhidden by the release of Mel's magic. Albert tells her his decision to respect Liz was conscious, but at this very moment, he cared more about protecting his sister. Liz kept throwing a pity party, saying the one she loved didn't love her, and all the people she thought had loved her were only under a spell. Liz didn't know what she was supposed to do. She didn't have a manual on how to be the saint, and she didn't want to bear this all alone. Alicia knew that if this was the game, as long as the heroine had love, she'd get the happy ending. But this was reality. It takes more than love and romance to survive. Alicia scolded Liz for acting like a spoiled child. She told Liz to pursue her own ideals. She wanted Liz to think about her own happiness, and to stop paying attention to what the masses wanted the saint to be. Liz's sadness turned to joy. Even though the smiles around her right now were fake, she desired the idea of the smiles being real one day. The two girls declared themselves as equal rivals, because there were still qualities Liz had Alicia felt she herself didn't. Liz then got over her crush on Duke immediately, basically calling her confession anticlimactic. With him about to profess his love for Alicia again, Alicia could hardly believe it. Liz then took the ancient text and decided since she'd be having lunch alone these days, she'd use this time to improve herself. Everyone in the room liked this sassier, more human-like person that she was on the inside. Later that night, Duke and Alicia presented his father with his older brother William. Luke was shocked, having no idea where his older brother had been this entire time, and could now see Alicia had given him one of her eyes. The two brothers caught up in a loving embrace, and outside, Alicia and Duke explained the village of Luana would be set free soon, since there weren't currently any criminals residing in it. Much to Jill's joy, Alicia figured the king would reward her for all that she's done, so she wanted to request time off from being Liz's watcher. Duke accepted her decision, but now he wanted to know when he'd get a response from Alicia from his confession. He didn't need an answer now, but he wanted to hear from her someday. She was still flustered the next day at school, but when seeing the prince, he suddenly walked by without acknowledging her. Then, when they tried to talk to him, he just asked who Alicia was. Duke tries asking Jill about this unfamiliar girl. Jill, of course, is a little annoyed, proclaiming Alicia's name loud and clear. Both Alicia and Jill are then shocked to hear Duke truly had no idea who she was. The two sit down with Finn and Curtis during lunch. Curtis is a little nervous, wondering if something had happened between her and Duke, considering the prince had always kept her to himself. Henry asked Duke directly if he was having a lover's quarrel with Alicia. But still, the prince asked who she was. His eyes had returned to their coldest form since before meeting her. They later discover Alicia has been ordered to be held under trial. Alicia's father had no idea what was going on, but this was the direct order of Prince Duke himself. Alicia accepted, believing she could prove her innocence. Her mother gave encouragement, and her father agreed to go with her in order to confront the king as well. The two were separated, with Duke William sent to meet with the rest of the 5 great noble families, and Alicia escorted to meet Duke alone. With so much going on, she felt calm in a way. She didn't believe this was the work of Liz or any of her followers. This scheme was far too elaborate to be the work of simple bullying. At this rate, Alicia would receive capital punishment and be banished from the kingdom. However, being banished is exactly what she wanted. Joan Evans led the trial, with Prince Duke as witness. She was apparently under suspicion of casting memory-erasing magic on Duke. The evidence? Mel suddenly appeared, citing a high-level dark magic that could control people's minds, and that only Alicia had reached a level high enough to use it. Also, she was with Prince Duke at the castle last night. Duke Evans then asked what she was doing with him the previous night, but Alicia of course could not speak on this, given Grandpa Will's situation was to be kept secret until the king made an announcement. Alicia knew Mel should have been aware of that, but why? She then understood what was going on, so she played her role, telling Duke Evans to go ahead and exile her from the kingdom. She took off her necklace and tossed it back to Duke, giving her good day and gratitude to him, and so he officially declared her banishment. She was the talk of the academy, many saying they knew she'd do something terrible sooner or later. Carol didn't believe that to be the case though, and so did Jane, who said Alicia was good at keeping her true intentions hidden. Gail, Curtis, and Finn discussed the fact that despite Alicia's exile, the Williams family remained unpunished. With all the achievements the prominent family had, they left Alicia to bear all the responsibility herself. They understood why Albert and the brothers might not be attending school for a while, but Liz also hadn't been attending as well for some reason. Duke's also been gone, supposedly to deal with the liberation of Luana, since barrier removal required high-level water magic. We then see Eric chatting with Paul, the herb shop owner, asking if there was a plant that could boost mana. You see, Eric felt bad because if his mana was a bit stronger, he wouldn't have fallen under Liz's spell and could have faced both Liz and Alicia properly. There was no plant that increased mana, so instead, Paul offered him a bouquet to give as an apology. Back at Luana, both Nate and Rebecca are shocked to hear about Alicia's exile orders. They were aghast, considering she was being exiled the very day of the village's liberation. Jill was especially hurt because Alicia refused to take him with her. Will gave them the unfortunate news that Prince Duke's word was law, but also gave them reprieve knowing these actions had all been intentional. He told them to just think about it. It wasn't even possible for anyone to put Duke under a spell, and this revelation finally hit Jill. The 3 Williams brothers were listening in on a juicy conversation.
Alicia was surprised to find Liz at her house. Liz apparently couldn't bear to see her rival walking into this trap without resisting. She learned what was happening when Eric came to apologize to her while she had locked herself away, practicing to control her charm magic. She was determined to catch who was behind all of this. Alicia told her there was no need though, since she knew who was orchestrating this. Prince Duke. And hearing this, the three brothers stumbled in, completely shocked. Alicia went on, describing Duke to have the greatest magical capacity of anyone in the kingdom. No one could best him. In other words, he was just pretending to have lost his memories to exile her. He must have realized she wanted to be sent away from the kingdom to investigate Laval. Will knew his nephew had always been soft on Alicia. Since the first day she visited Lawana, Duke visited him in advance, asking to keep her safe. He certainly dragged a lot of people into it to make this happen, but Will's certain Alicia knows. Liz told Alicia to hold on. Duke exiled Alicia out of his love for her? Hearing this made Alicia bright red. Liz figured Duke had confessed to Alicia recently and asked why she kept running away from his love. Keeping her feelings for him vague must feel good for Alicia, but it was probably hurting him. She declared what Alicia was doing to Duke is what a villainess would do. These words rang through Alicia's mind. That wasn't the kind of villainess she wanted to be. Meeting with the entire family, Arnold explained everything to his wife and sons, and that King Luke also knew what was going on. The state of affairs with Laval had always been a sticking point for their nation, but it was difficult to find the right person to deal with it. In her room, Alicia gave Jill a thank you letter to give to Duke. She wanted him to tell Duke she couldn't return his feelings. Jill was shocked to hear this, but Alicia had to be firm. She wanted to make her dreams come true. She knew her feelings for him stood in the way of that. She had to get rid of them. Jill began to cry, asking if he stood in the way of her dreams too. He promised to work harder and didn't want her to leave him alone. She assured him it was fine, knowing one day they'd meet again. Meet again at the top. Jill stopped sulking, now saying he'd show everyone that commoners were just as good as nobles. And he now had the job of keeping an eye on Liz while she was gone. His work was to lead Liz into being a rival worthy of her as well. That same night though, Duke squeezed the necklace Alicia tossed back at him. In the morning, Alicia began her escort to banishment while Duke lifted the barrier. Alicia's father told her there was no need to go to Laval and that she could just hide in some quiet corner of their family's domain. She apologized for making him worry, but this was who she was. The fog lifted, and the sun shined brightly upon the once sealed and discarded village within the kingdom of Durkis. Nate immediately ran to who he thought was the prince to tell him he should go to Alicia. He was surprised to find it was Liz, wearing Duke's shawl. She could also use water magic, so she had assisted with lifting the barrier. Mel explained Duke took off instantly using teleportation magic, and with those words, the two royal brothers once separated joined hands in front of their subjects. Nearly reaching the border, Alicia's carriage was obstructed by a pillar of ice. Suddenly opening her door, Duke comes in to kiss her. He apologized, telling her this was the only way he could think of to get her legally into Laval. But truly, there would never come a day where he'd forget about her. In her mind, she thought about how she'd spent all her time chasing her dream, and how if she hadn't poured her time in, it would never come true. She felt she didn't have time for love, and besides, no one could survive on love or romance anyway. But she also felt this was so unfair that Duke used force to teach her that no one survived on dreams and ambition alone either. She told him not to apologize. She was grateful to have received the gift of the prince's favor. She gave him a light kiss, much to his surprise, and asked him to wait for her, because the next time they'd meet, she promised to be a villainess capable of charming him even more. Back meeting alone with his wife, Duke Williams was shocked to see the rose that governs the kingdom's fate had turned black. The Duchess explained it had bloomed for just one night when Alicia was 7, and she had been taking care to preserve it the entire time. With Alicia maturing so greatly since then, she knew this all must be fate. She didn't tell her husband because he might have tried to hold Alicia back, but felt if all she could do was cheer her daughter on, the least she could do was respect her wishes. Being escorted to Laval, Alicia thought back to Duke saying he'd come for her if she waited. And with this being his first letter from her, he'd definitely frame it, making her embarrassed, and telling him to throw it away, but he wouldn't. Being shown the door to the border, she thought about how Alicia got exiled during the true ending. and considered that maybe the story was still following the game's script. Still, she'd take on any hardships that awaited her. While Duke waited during her leave, he just thought of how she told him he might get a reward if he waited like a good boy. He teased, calling her an evil woman. But of course, she was going to be the greatest who'd go down in history. Man, a bittersweet ending to this series. Usually, these types of shows don't get a second season, but I'd really like to continue watching Alicia's adventures, so I hope there's more to come. Subscribe to the channel and I'll definitely cover season 2 when it comes out. For now though, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.